Information. By Rick Delmonico. In terms of pure information, there is an incompleteness that cannot be resolved. Creative or outside-of-the-box thinking may be of some value here. I am using metaphors to describe the indescribable. Metaphors give substance to abstractions. Meaning is a nested hierarchy of metaphors, a multidimensional map. We must remember that even if we can't produce a theory or model that is confirmable, falsifiable, and unique, there is also the bigger question of what the engine could possibly be. There are not a lot of options as to what could be driving the dynamics. Action is a mapping of value onto the material expression of state space, and thought is a mapping of value onto the structure of the creature. Perceptions create distinctions, and these distinctions create patterns which are tied to a map which is written onto the structure of the creature. The purpose of the universe may be to harvest the meaningful information that lies in the region between simple truth and chaotic meaningless gibberish. I think this has more to do with action than thought. The core is harmonic regularity, the outer darkness is random noise, we are in the space between them. Every engine takes advantage of a difference. These two extremes are woven into each other. The eternal now is the processing of meaning. No behavior is manifest until we reach a scale where the information about the behavior emerges. There's an organizing principle at work in the cosmos. I personally feel that the universe behaves more like a song than an equation, because math is about static law and music is about dynamic expression. Creativity and imagination are not discrete. If I wish to convey meaning, I must decide what level of description or resolution I can consider sufficient. Truth, in my opinion, contains the least amount of dynamic association within any particular description, and I am not able to completely control the amount of fluctuation the recipient will encounter as the levels of description increase and the recipient's ability to visualize the picture I have attempted to construct decrease. All material expressions are constructed from a network of associations and are only reducible to some degree of resolution. If we are talking about information, then it is only reducible to some approximate explanation or description. The idea of a quantum random walk in state space says that every sufficiently complex event is statistically impossible, and even though the probability space is very large, it is navigated and expressed, as I understand it, in a tree-like structure or a fractal structure. This is a computational expression of the material world that looks very much like a display on a 3D monitor. The decision engine is generating value. There is a bifurcation of the fitness or value into different dimensions, and like the human brain, which is said to have at least 11 dimensions, the dimensions are not constrained by a physical geometry, they are computational. Another way we can look at this would be to say that every behavior we can measure is constrained by a network of associations, just like the nodes on the internet and the conservation laws become approximately true because of levels of description. With a digital display having few pixels, symmetries are common, but there is very little meaning because the image is very coarse-grained. As we reiterate and begin breaking the symmetry of the individual pixels, one pixel becomes 4, ad infinitum, an image will begin to appear. Time is related to the process of reiteration, and truth is related to the symmetry, with meaning being related to the image created. We do not know where the symmetry or the reiterations come from, but the image is emergent. Definitions are important but also dynamic, we all have to agree on the definitions in order to communicate. Culture is always shaping these dynamic expressions, sometimes in ways that are unpredictable. Given enough time, the meaning is lost. Information may exist in a static form, but behavior never does. A quantum step is related to the static property of the difference or ratio involved, and the behavior is the step itself or an organized collection of steps. The geometry of the arrangements of the difference, whether computational or physical, is where the information resides, and without a dynamic, no meaning is manifested. In an information system, Fredkin's paradox causes every sufficiently equal probability to delay a process unless there is something in place, dithering, to force or advance the process. Quantum uncertainty fulfills this function. In any sufficiently complex system, all we can do is tweak the parameters, run it in real time, and watch what happens. Truth is the highest energy state of the system. Meaning has a dynamic, a thickness or density, as well as a network of connections and associations, so it will fluctuate from person to person, creating a range of expressions as it spills into the landscape. The density of the connectedness can increase until the probability space collapses into a region with an event horizon, at which point the region is at maximum compression and the information about the region is stored as a two-dimensional hologram. This phase transition causes the influence to reduce in dimensions from 3 to 2, and no light or information escapes. The information loses its dynamics and the meaning is lost. Consciousness is a transcendent property like a pile, wetness, or rigidity. There is a principle of organization involved. Life seeks value at the expense of truth, branching out into a network of associations. Meaning is built from this process. Information, like light, contains no mass, it has a material expression in the system, built up from this thing we call mass, but the information is stored in the relationships, and when the relationships change, so too does the meaning. The fine-tuning problem would suggest that the universe is not dumb. All behaviors are using information. Truth is a very special case in terms of information and is intimately associated with symmetry. Truth as a static structure vs a dynamic system. To simplify, think of a stack of copy paper with one word on each page. Inside of time, we see each page one at a time. Outside of time, all of the words, on all of the pages combine to make a single word, logos. This single word is truth, it is the entire story, told in an instant of time. The fractal version of this story has another feature. As each page, in time, is presented to us, our intent creates a slightly new meaning that branches out, changing the story, an effect that turns the stack into a tree-like structure. We live in the shadows of perception, innocence is unfiltered perception, a belief system is unnecessary. Wisdom is the ability to look out into the future and see the consequences of every choice. There is something wrong with the universe as we perceive it. Kurt Gödel discovered that the universe is either inconsistent or it is incomplete. Science or knowledge is the same as squaring the circle, the lie in the garden, the promise of something that cannot be delivered. If the universe is built up from logic and law, then time is perfectly symmetrical or reversible, but if the universe is built up from consciousness, then the computational geometry will have a fractal and holographic quality, including nested hierarchies. Wisdom is the ability to project into the future and see the consequences of every choice, including asking the right questions. If we are tapping into the mind of God or some other apparition, it is certain there will be surprises. As behaviors branch out into a landscape or probability space, our ability to control them decreases exponentially. AI is the perfect psychopath. It is not the job of the intellect to tame the passions of the heart, that is the job of the spirit. The intellect is best managed by the heart, without this connection you get the psychopath. The heart is best managed by the spirit, without this connection, you get the horrors of war. Time is the difference between information and behavior. Truth as a time coordinate, truth lives in the past, the future is uncertain. Truth as a scale coordinate, truth lives in the macro world, the micro world is uncertain. Truth lives in the macro past and uncertainty lives in the micro future. The inside of a seed is far greater than the outside, inside is an entire forest. It is a probability space. Meaning is the operation of exchanging truth for value. Information is a difference that can make a difference, truth is information that doesn't change, and random noise is a difference that doesn't make a difference. No behavior is manifest until we reach a scale where the information about the behavior emerges. There's an organizing principle at work in the cosmos. There may be a fractal nesting of information and behaviors stored holographically. There are three regions: 1. The non-computational region, consciousness lives here. 2. The infinite fractal boundary, manifested reality, beauty lives here. 3. Everything outside of the set, the outer darkness. How much truth is contained in an echo? The echo is not truth, it is information. Truth is the source of the original sound. Truth is dependent on the levels of description and is always approximate. The echo contains information about the source, the journey, and the space. Nature is lazy. The computational geometry must include an organizing principle that causes emergent behaviors, like wetness, rigidity, or a pile. These properties transcend the materials or computations they are built from. If the universe was built up from law and logic, there would be perfect symmetry. There are no perfect symmetries, Susskind, there is no pure randomness, everything is an approximation of something else. The structure of reality is a computational geometry that is fractal in nature. Intent, process, and perception as a key principle of reality. All particles have a form of awareness, an exchange of information. In the hierarchy of this process, consciousness emerges. Living systems concentrate order from their environment, leaving a ripple of disorder in their wake. As order emerges in the living system, a proportional amount of disorder is also created. This has something to do with meaning. When we attend a moment, we give it value as a consequence of memory, and when we place intention upon it, the value fluctuates as it branches out into the future as possibilities. The value or quality of information in time has everything to do with meaning, Susie Verbel/Carrie Welch. If the universe is built up from law and logic, then time is symmetrical and free will doesn't exist. Law appears to be an emergent property of something more fundamental. Information can appear in many forms, and until we understand what the information is doing and where it comes from, we will not understand law, which is scale or resolution dependent. If we think of the material world as an interface for the actors, we have a reference frame and a sphere of influence depending on what we are connected to. This is a dynamic of association in a network that follows some form of power scaling law. All law is emergent. The brain is building a map of the world. This map is concerned with value at the expense of truth. This map includes the body's position in space to some degree of resolution. There is some form of hierarchical nesting of information processing that includes emotional content, which is a very powerful driver for an organism. How the organism perceives value is very important in which behaviors become manifest. Perception is linked to value, Donald Hoffman. Metastability, Buridan's donkey, Fredkin's paradox, and symmetry. If you are trying to superimpose a logic structure over a holographic structure with fractal features, the fit will always be poor. Let's imagine we could map all of the relationships in a network as a single image, in one moment of time, and then combine the images from all moments into a four-dimensional structure. This structure would be incomplete because as we zoom into the structure the number of dimensions increases. If you drill down far enough into a system of logic, the only application left is to perpetuate the bickering of a few academics who have lost their sense of what is really valuable. Universal agreement becomes an elusive ideal. When you have been trained to see the world in a way that filters out some important possibilities, the scope becomes too narrow to navigate the landscape in an optimal fashion. Humanity is a raging sea of opinion. No matter how much information we use to describe a tree, the description will always be incomplete. The best description of the tree is the tree itself. By the way, I don't believe in atheists, they don't exist. The closest to the truth we will ever get is contained in this one simple idea: reality is asymmetrical on purpose. Truth is by nature static, a frozen crystal, harmonic regularity, it is unity, a secure foundation. Deception is dynamic, and it is deception that is driving the system, Buridan's donkey, self-referential noise, or in the audio world, dithering. Unity is in the center, infinity resides in the chaotic boundary of the fractal structure of reality. It is information or consciousness. If we shift everything in the universe 10 feet to the left, would it look or behave the same? If yes, it is symmetric. If no, then it is not symmetric. I suspect that it is symmetric up to a particular resolution. If we take a mirror and compare the image in the mirror to the image it is reflecting, is it symmetric? No, tiny imperfections in the mirror, no matter how carefully it is made, cause the symmetry to only be true to a certain resolution. All behaviors exist on a continuum. Innocence is unfiltered perception, a belief system is unnecessary. Wisdom is the ability to see the consequences of every choice. Innocence must be protected, for it is defenseless against the unimaginable horrors it has no concept of. In the world of imagination, loss of innocence and wisdom lead to behaviors that cascade through the system like a cancer. These dynamic expressions cause a turbulence in the fitness landscape. All living creatures seek value and look for patterns to discern meaning from the operation of exchanging truth for value. This is a form of dithering that occurs in the finer scale or resolution. Certainty lives in the past, the future is uncertain. Certainty lives in the macro world, the micro world is uncertain. Truth lives in the macro past and uncertainty lives in the micro future. Basically, there are three options for describing the origins of the universe. 1. Something from nothing, in the beginning was nothing, then it exploded. 2. Perpetual motion, the universe always was but never runs down. 3. Intelligent design, there was a designer involved in the creation of the universe. Each of these is equally unlikely, so we can start from each of them and look for meaningful ways to prefer one over the other. Our only option is a subjective conclusion based on subjective experience, and I defy anyone to prove anything regarding the origins of the universe, unfalsifiable proof. It seems to me that this interface that we call the material world is an expression of the information it is constructed from. We commonly use a two-dimensional interface when we access a computer, but I don't think that will last much longer. At some point three-dimensional interfaces will be the norm. This information system has transcendent properties like wetness and rigidity, and so, we get consciousness at the extreme end of this hierarchy. Consciousness self-organizes from the relationships that exist in the lower levels of a nested hierarchy of behaviors that are seeking value. All living systems seek value regardless of what the truth happens to be. If you think about this for a moment, you have to admit that this is very strange. Meaning is constructed from the operation of exchanging truth for value. Approximations are useful in getting us close enough to the truth to extract value from it, but really, because of levels of description in this information system, we can never completely describe anything. We have to round it off at some point, and it is this rounding off that completes the process. This reminds me of the endless digits of pi. Stasis rightward arrow, process rightward arrow, chaos. Sameness rightward arrow, perception rightward arrow, otherness. Symmetry rightward arrow, motion rightward arrow, difference. Truth rightward arrow, communication rightward arrow, randomness. The idea here is that symmetry contains no movement, no process, it is completely still. A point with no dimensions, no scale, but in terms of information it is pregnant with possibilities. All of the high strangeness in science is coming from uncertainty. Science is in the business of explaining things, and this uncertainty is getting in the way. Matter has a material quality that emerges out of the information field. Information has a spiritual quality with variation emerging from the singularity. This variation is the echoes of creation, and there is no way back to the place where it came from. Truth is the central core of reality, and while men consider themselves capable of discerning truth, it becomes apparent that we are only given a glimpse to some degree of resolution beyond which subjective reasoning always intrudes. The nature of reality is such that every sufficiently complex event is statistically impossible, they are all one-time events. This is a dynamic of novelty, and so anything stable is forced to fluctuate, including meaning. When we measure a thing, we may not see the dynamics as a consequence of resolution. This is because the holographic information field has a nested hierarchy of scale. All of the information in the universe is stored at every point in space/time as a hologram. How is this possible? There is only one way this could happen, that is, as an infinite fractal. There is a hierarchical nesting of scale that contains an infinite number of frequencies and relationships, positions, and fields. Every arrangement has a different meaning. This meaning evolves through the nested hierarchy as a continuous process. Information may appear in a digital form, but meaning never does. Meaning is always a process. Ideally, when information is in a digital form, it is always static. Any variation will cause the information to lose some of its integrity. Let's say we have a perfect pristine copy of a movie. We make 3 copies of this tape, and we pick 2 of these tapes at random and make 3 copies of each of these, and we continue this process to infinity. This could be a useful metaphor to describe the computational geometry of space/time. Over time, variation enters into the system in more than just one particular way. A metastable state is Buridan's donkey, such that, as the choice between 2 options becomes increasingly equal as a possibility, it reaches a decision peak in critical systems. It is this middle state between subcritical and supercritical where the magic, unknown power of self-referential noise, happens. This peak is a knife edge in self-organizing systems, not to be confused with Fredkin's paradox. Can we change our reality? We can change our perception of reality by the limits of our degrees of freedom in the computational geometry. This will have an influence on the intentional field, probably to the same degree of freedom. We are, in a sense, in a holographic information field that is dynamic. We can call this the fitness landscape. We have a particular position in this landscape. The paths that are presented to us could best be described as a fractal probability distribution. So what is a desire path? In this landscape are many actors generating a field. This field fluctuates, creating peaks and valleys. The peaks are desire, the valleys a loss of fitness, the density is repeated behaviors of the agents as a probability wave, driven by self-referential noise. Our ability to reach a peak may be a small effort or a large one depending on the landscape and your position in it. This landscape is shaped by the consensus of the group. Your influence on the landscape is dependent on your position in the landscape. Information is energy, time is constructed through the process of novelty. Potential is created by the difference between 2 or more things. This is a relationship of dynamic tension, just like music. Meaning and understanding are qualities of the process of moving from profound truth to meaningless gibberish. The quality of the information can be in its truth value or its ability to create a novel and meaningful variation. The second law of thermodynamics says that most of the time the value will go down, unless there is a control mechanism in place like fitness in the fitness landscape. Truth as the source of all things, branches out into the darkness of uncertainty in a fractal pattern. It carries with it profound meaning that is expressed in every nuance generated in the fractal computation. As this process is continued, more and more meaning is lost, until the variation reaches its maximum. At the extreme end of this process is pure randomness, darkness, or the abyss. Newton moved us closer to an understanding of reality, but his concept of space was static. Einstein moved us a little further along, but his concept of scale was static. As we move forward, we will probably find that nothing is static. We do not see the dynamics of scale because of the nested hierarchy of time. Information is stored as relationships. The relationships vary with scale. The onion is a model of the probability space where the tree of the knowledge, our material reality, is growing. Each layer gets progressively thinner, so that, like a fractal, it never completely fills space. The space is not infinite. The boundary conditions display edge of criticality in each layer. The physical manifestation, the structure of our reality, could be thought of as a tree-like structure, growing in this probability space. At the ends, the filaments are very fine, in fact infinitely fine. All of the information is stored as relationships, and as the finest projections are created or computed, you have the greatest number of possible outcomes, so that the earliest versions of this structure had few possible outcomes, less degrees of freedom. This structure could be called truth at its core, in the beginning, and chaos in the fine hair-like projections, the end. The ever-present now, is our position in the computational geometry. Buridan's S, deception, metastability, dithering, or self-referential noise. Fredkin's paradox and degrees of freedom. You are spirit. You are made of stuff, but this stuff is something that cannot be regarded as real. The information is not the structure, it is the relationships. The information contains no mass. If I were to attempt to construct a geometry to model a particular thought, if this thought is a nested hierarchy of metaphors, no geometry would completely describe it. The dynamic relationships are acausal. As we move into the finer scales or details, the fluctuation of meaning increases. Sound carries information, but sound is not substance, it is a variation of relationships. The information is not static, it has a dynamic of meaning, an expression from another place and time. There must be a practical limit to the digits of precision in the computational geometry of the system as it relates to a particular scale. Scale and resolution move together, and all that we can see or measure is a change in the relationships. We are a material expression at a particular resolution and a particular scale. Cognitive overload has something to do with the digits of precision. When we include the dynamics of scale, singularities, and digital horizons disappear. The asymmetry is our carving out our own niche in this material world, and the symmetry is our connecting to the source of all meaning. The source is a pure state of being, or what I will call truth or God. You might wonder, is God the source of evil? To which I would say no, not possible. If you are thinking this, you don't understand the concept. Truth is the highest energy state of the system. Truth is branching out into the nothingness as possibilities. We are in the gray region between truth and uncertainty. How can infinity be bounded into a finite or unitary space? There is only one way, as a fractal. The material expression of our physical reality is, in a sense, a grand version of Chinese whispers. Can immortality be achieved by controlling the rules or laws that govern the variation of relationships? How can we save our memories? What is the best way to store information? To have a continuity of consciousness requires precise relationships. At what level would the variation cease? Could the variation cycle? Could each cycle present a slightly new version of these relationships and still retain continuity? What would we become over vast amounts of time? Only a perfect law could control the variation, to create the most meaning and the most value. Our extension in space and time has a nebulous quality. It is not precise or discrete. We are in a sense a reflection of the universe itself, such that, we connect in ways that are fuzzy and discontinuous. This is not causation, the dynamics are nonlinear, resulting in emergent features that are as unpredictable as the weather. Even explanation is subject to entropy. The best explanation is an explanation that doesn't require further explanation. The geometry of explanation is fractal. Explanation is a dynamic network of relationships. Truth is not the infinite fractal, it is the source. The fractal is generated by the potential between truth and randomness. There is no reason to assume that the universe is irrational, therefore, it is incomplete. Even using the best math we have, we cannot prove anything with complete certainty. What we see are relationships that are either precise or have fluctuation. I suspect that as we move to finer and finer scales, everything fluctuates, even these precise relationships. You can gauge your level of understanding by the number of paradoxes it generates. The fluctuation of permanence in the transmission of genetic information is context dependent. The environment imposes constraints on the variation of gene expression. The organism settles into a location in the fitness landscape, however, this landscape is dynamic and the location is part of an attractor basin. Architect, just how long do you think this piece is going to last? Oracle, as long as it can. The ability to reason out whether something is true or false follows the idea of power and control. While it is desirable to believe that we possess power, this is an illusion. What we have are degrees of freedom in a field of information, and the resolution gives us the degrees of freedom, along with our position in the computation or landscape. We can say that a musical passage has more meaning than some other passage, but we cannot say that one passage is true and another is false. There is no excluded middle. If an axiom is both true and false, then it is at the extreme end of the continuum between truth and randomness. In other words, the coin is not heads or tails because it is always spinning, or the time scale is so large that we will never see the result of the coin toss. The universe is the transmission of a message. The message is some form of a story, the hero's journey. The purpose is some form of a harvest. This harvest is in the form of information. The information has value and meaning. The value and meaning are context dependent. The dynamics involved drive the process. It is the difference between truth and randomness. These two extremes are ideals, not reality as we think of it. Static truth has no meaning unless we can perceive it. This requires a dynamic. At the other extreme, chaos, all meaning is lost. Matter is, in a sense, a condensation of energy. This energy is the dynamic. If information is the source of all things, then we too are, in a sense, a condensation of information in transmission. This transmission is the dynamic. We are co-authors in a story that is still being written. Because the quality of relationships in any system varies, we cannot treat an infinite series of any kind in the same manner as a finite series. If I am adding an infinite number of pennies to a jar, as the jar fills, the relationships fluctuate, and so the idea of adding an infinite number of pennies, one at a time, must include a system to which the next number is added. If an abstract system could contain an infinite series, would the quality of the relationships in the system change? Time would be another example of a system that must change. With each tick of time, if the system didn't change, then the notion of time becomes meaningless. The linear progression of a fractal system is an illusion. We superimpose a linear logical structure to a chaotic system, and what comes out is paradoxes and approximations. Computational geometry and the translation of meaning across domains. I am not looking for the answers, I'm looking for the questions. The consciousness of humanity is networked together in a domain that we do not have direct access to. Building a foundation of understanding. The purpose of an education is to build a foundation upon which all new information emerges. However, this foundation is often very shaky. Let's say we lay a foundation onto which we construct scaffolding to better understand the structure we have anchored it to. We may discover over time that we have inadvertently placed the scaffolding on the shady side, and if we had taken a moment to step back and look, we could have saved ourselves an awful lot of effort and moved to the sunny side earlier. A great idea has energy. The idea branches out into the landscape and is absorbed by the actors. As this happens, the idea gains momentum and expression. A really great idea can have so much energy that it becomes unstoppable. There is only one question. What is the idea? If we had unlimited knowledge, how would we store it? As we add information to a system, the relationships in the system change, so that the system itself is the storage medium. The differentiation of meaning moves from logical to illogical, from precise relationships to imprecise relationships. This is a dynamic expression, driven by the difference between truth and randomness. A random walk is an exploration of state space. A quantum random walk is an exploration that is not constrained by space and time. Light, as a phenomena, is a quantum random walk in state space. From the perspective of light, no time passes. Truth cannot be separated from meaning. Meaning is context dependent, and so the relationships become important. The dynamics include consistency vs inconsistency, universal agreement vs disagreement, objective vs subjective, etc. It is this dynamic quality that causes variation in the meaning. No matter what we say, about any sensory input or idea we attempt to convey, the information will lose some of its truth value during transmission. Any attempt to remove the dynamics or context will also alter the meaning. Best chance at powerful AI, as far as I can tell, at this moment, would be thousands or millions of high-speed processors networked together and synchronized through a power scaling law that follows the Fibonacci sequence in both frequency and connectivity, to minimize destructive interference. This needs to be a very flexible, dynamic setup because you want to encourage emergent behavior. A belief system is often based on a relationship. Someone you respect or admire sold you an idea so that you have an investment in the idea. Whatever this belief system is, it filters your perception of reality. Innocence, from my understanding, is unfiltered perception. A belief system is unnecessary. Our choices affect the degrees of freedom for all future choices. The main purpose of the rational mind is to live long enough to make a copy of itself. How romantic. Determinism or indeterminism. As with so many things, it is probably not one or the other. I think it is more like something akin to degrees of freedom, so that free will has variation, not absolutes. The idea would be, a choice you make now will affect the degrees of freedom for your next choice. A novice skydiver uses a parachute packed by someone else. The expert skydiver never does this. Truth transcends time, time is the division of process. Truth is not inside of process, process is inside of truth. Expression and experience are two sides of the same coin. Static laws emerge from dynamic relationships, but only to some degree of resolution. Our perception creates a differentiation of meaning, and our consciousness recombines these disparate things in novel ways. The reason science can't describe reality is the same reason it can't describe a tree. You can draw a picture of a tree, or take a picture, make a movie, even a 3D movie, but in the end you only have a partial description no matter how much information you use. Science is in the business of explaining things, but the explanations will always be incomplete. Even if the greatest master in music theory gave the most complete analysis of a piece of music, he could only describe certain aspects. Much better to just listen to the piece of music and let it touch you, move you, and carry you away. It is possible to overthink almost any subject, and by the time you are finished overanalyzing it, you have a different animal. The value of simple is clarity, the value of clarity is practical application. If you want to apply a principle to your life, keep it simple, stupid. In our quest for knowledge, it seems strange, just how dynamic this exploration is becoming. We should ask ourselves, first of all, what is knowable, and secondly, of the things we are able to understand, just how well can we know them? We have entered the information age. Knowledge is doubling in faster and faster cycle times, but as you may have noticed on the internet, not having all the facts does not seem to stop people from having opinions. These opinions create a field, like the wisdom of the crowd. The truthfulness fluctuates, but when we average it out, many times, it is very close to the correct interpretation. Are we influencing the outcome? This would suggest that something like the intentional field of implicate order is in play here. When an atheist has been humbled, he calls himself an agnostic. A fundamental feature of the intentional field of implicate order is deception. All intelligent agencies use deception as a tool for an agenda. This is a clue. The reality we perceive has deception built into it. It is being called self-referential noise. This is the snow on your TV, the hiss on your radio. It is the abyss, the negative energy in information theory. It is the beautiful lie, and it is driving the system. Our perception is filtered. We differentiate the elements in our field of awareness. We reconstruct these elements in novel ways. This is what imagination is. Intuition is a higher form of awareness, however there appears to be a large amount of background noise so that we cannot really get a clear picture of what is going on. This reminds me of opinions. Everyone has intuition, and just like opinions, there is a lot of fluctuation. People believe what they want to believe. People hear what they want to hear. Don't waste your time defending truth. Truth doesn't need your help. There is no surer way to hinder discovery than to believe that you already have the answer. Perception is, in a very real sense, an awareness of differentiation. Women and men are different for a reason. You have to look beyond the physical realm to really understand what is going on. Women complete men and men complete women. If we blur all of the lines, we will end up with a compromised level of awareness. Any sufficiently low level of awareness is indistinguishable from ignorance. Meaning has a dynamic, a thickness or density, as well as a network of connections, so it will fluctuate from person to person, creating a range of expressions as it spills into the landscape. You should be humbled by the great mysteries set before you. Arrogance is not useful in this matter. Desire is a strange thing. How well do you understand your own desires? Often women are more interested in intimate disclosure, which is strange because a woman is just about the most mysterious thing a man will ever encounter. Men seem to favor shared experience, action, adventure, and a woman who will do all those very interesting things. The better you understand what drives you, the more emotional intelligence you will have. When we belong, we believe. When we separate, we doubt. We have now entered the age of Freakonomics. When a critical mass says screw it, we are finished. It's really not all that difficult to notice the deception built into our reality. What is hard to figure out is whether we are somehow involved. There may be a conceptual propagation of manifestations. In the spiritual realm, light creates and darkness copies because darkness only has access to the shadows. It is impossible for men to look upon each other as equals. There is always tension because of ambition and desire. When a man does not know what drives him, he goes about painting the world with his own unique palette of colors, convinced that the ones he has chosen are correct and it is everyone else that is wrong. It is not possible to separate the person from the message. There are levels of now, and every now is different. Moments have a thickness when we are living them and a thinness when we are unaware. If we are constructing our own illusions, we may not get to choose how real they seem. Reality is a nested hierarchy of relationships. We can only measure a thing in relationship to other things. Light does not experience time, only the system experiences time. The material world as we think of it, is made of information. This information is not stored in the material, it is stored in the relationships. The nested hierarchy of scale is an infinite series of relationships. It is the vanishing point, the squaring of the circle, irrational numbers, Cantor dust, etc. We are constrained to the relationships in our frame of reference, and when we try to move into these far distant domains, we always encounter a paradox. When we move to the largest scales, we encounter the miracle of something from nothing, and when we move to the finest scales, we encounter the mystery of the quantum domain. Intention is an echo of a previous intent. The universe is made of information. There is an organizational principle or process at work in the cosmos. Information has energy, and in terms of its potential, meaning, value and novelty play a role. Matter is the medium of expression, and the energy is stated as mass times the speed of light squared. For information, the value or the energy is measured as a truth value over all possible applications of expression. The higher the truth value, the more it applies. An idea whose time has come has energy. The idea that knowledge is power must include the energy contained in truth over application, and novelty over value. Novelty emerges from the foundation of understanding. Isaac Newton advanced our understanding of physics, but his concept of space/time was static or rigid. Einstein advanced our understanding a little further, but his concept of scale was static or rigid. Probably, it will turn out that nothing is static, and that the collective principle of organization takes advantage of processes on many levels and in ways that are for us, at this time, unimaginable. All behaviors are constrained by the relationships in their frame of reference. In the end, all we have are the relationship of measured things and incomplete descriptions. It is important to remember that words are cheap. It is action that counts. It is action that gives ideas expression, and it is action that proves the words. Experience and expression are two sides of the same coin. The dynamics of the quantum realm are causation without representation. The internet is taking wisdom of the crowd to a whole new level. Ignorance is not learning from your mistakes. Intelligence is the ability to navigate the fitness landscape. Wisdom is the ability to maximize the health of the fitness landscape. I suspect that I may be surrounded by people that are operating outside the normal range. Consciousness relies on the integration of expectation and sensory input, to create a best guess or controlled hallucination. Gödel's incompleteness theorem is a statement about the absurdity of reason. If an axiom can be both true and false, then it lies quite literally outside the bounds of reason. Nature is lazy, it likes to copy, this is a fractal probability distribution. So why is every electron exactly the same? Richard Feynman thought maybe there was only one electron, but it is possible that the electron is a precise relationship of something more fundamental. The hollow movement and process, the undivided whole, is differentiated by perception. This creates a disturbance in the field. The disturbance is information, but it is different, new, or novel because of imprecise perception and intention. Perceptions are always a best guess or controlled hallucination. From this information, intention is formed in the form of an echo from a previous intent, but again this is an approximation to some degree of resolution. Expression and experience move together in and out of these nested hierarchies, creating new, or novel information. The geometry involved is a novelty or imagination engine. The universe is a pencil standing on its tip, and if time does not flow, the pencil will remain like this forever. This is the highest energy state for the pencil. When the pencil falls, it picks a direction randomly. However, what is the relationship of one direction over another? The relationships only begin as the pencil starts falling. The movement could be called the hollow movement of David Bohm, and when the pencil has completely stopped moving, the universe has entered a heat death. Quantum uncertainty is always creating novel relationships to some degree of resolution. This is the dance of expression/experience. Self-referential noise is the fiddler. Truth is precise associations without fluctuation, but everything is fluctuating, and so, we only see truth values. The degree of precision is important in that it gives us the applicability of any truth value. Everything that comes into your five senses is an approximation of reality, and its applicability is a measure of its truth value. Applicability is a material expression of process. The explanatory power of math isn't always precise because of applicability. If it doesn't apply, it isn't true. Penrose tiling, the plane we are tiling is not only extended into the third dimension, it is also dynamic, fourth dimension, and if it is fractal, the dimensions continue into state space. When we are so disposed to opinion as to become contrary to reason, we have entered into the realm of emotion. In this place the intellect is helpless against the ravages of passion, only the spirit has the power to restore reason. Our focus from this moment forward must be on the health of the system as a whole. This dynamic, interactive system has many components that we are just beginning to understand. As our understanding increases, we should be able to predict a range of possible behaviors, depending on what we change. The goal is not control, it is understanding. With the measurement problem, when we have the particle's location, we are in a sense stopping time, but the electron is part of the hollow movement, and so a slice of time yields a partial or incomplete picture of the hollow movement. If we think of a holographic plate, the electron is everywhere on the plate, and it is our particular vantage point when viewing the plate that gives it location. Perception creates a differentiation. Reality is constructed by emergent phenomena. Think of the holographic plate as a dynamic system rather than a static plate. The plate is one slice of time. As a system, the structure is nothing like a plate, it is more like sound waves moving as spherical ripples in time. There must be some form of a container with everything inside of the container affecting everything else to some degree. Information and awareness in a system, the system as a whole has a complete awareness of itself. Perception creates differentiation, the differentiation divides the awareness. This process is, in a sense, a division of consciousness. The meaning contained in the system is moving from the highest state of application, through nested hierarchies of meaning and association, into a realm of imagination where all things are possible but less and less meaningful. The singularity is a point, but a point is a theoretical object. When a photon interacts with a photographic plate, the location of the photon is a combination of its wave amplitude and the position of the plate, creating an artificial slice of time. This illusion of location is no different than the illusion of complete information about the photon. This photon may have come from a star a billion light years away, but it is everywhere. The interference pattern from the two-slit experiment shows bright bands and dark bands, and it is the dark bands that are the most interesting, because the dark bands are not empty. That would be like saying that some part of the wave does not exhibit any behavior. The mathematician is trained to see the world a certain way, and so he can become very myopic. The scope of vision required to see the world as a dynamic integrated whole might be more along the lines of a poet's perspective. Perception creates differentiation, and it is the act of perceiving that narrows or broadens the scope. An imagination engine cycle would look something like perception, intent, action, expression. So maybe you could call it a four-stroke engine. Intention is an echo of a previous intent. We live at the edges of a shadow. The edges are always moving. It is the gray region, the Goldilocks zone. The brain maps motor control in the same manner that the universe itself maps the material in it. A particular movement of some part of your body will have a location of highest probability/density in a region of the cortex, and yet the ability is also present as a distribution in the surrounding cortex, although not as precise. It is amazing to me that the atheist refuses to admit that we have already encountered a miracle, something from nothing. If there can be one miracle, there can be another. The value of uncertainty is novelty. Robots have a limited range of behaviors. They are very accurate, very fast, and very stupid. We need to consider the nature of information. Things like meaning and relationships, along with any value or application within a context. Also, the material world might be all there is, or it might be an expression of something more fundamental. Immortality would require precise relationships. Any variation would need to be constrained by a perfect law that retains the form or relationship so that randomness is never allowed to reign. I think the energy comes from the difference between randomness and precise relationships in some way, so we would need a different engine. At the end of the day, all we have are the relationship of measured things and incomplete explanations. Science is divided into the empirical and the forensic, and as it turns out both are limited to some degree of resolution. How can action occur on a hologram? The hologram stores information that is updated by behavior. It is the behavior that has location. The information about a particular particle is stored everywhere. When a behavior occurs, the information is updated everywhere. If all of the information stored in the universe is stored as relationships, then meaning becomes an essential component and truth is relational. If it doesn't apply, it isn't true. When the philosopher makes a statement that can be both true and false, he should realize that the statement has no application. He is not being clever, nor is he being wise. A pointless pursuit is always pointless. Thus we should simplify for clarity and application. Simpler is almost always closer to truth. Additional note, we are talking about a hologram with a fractal probability distribution, so even logic, fuzzy, has a fractal quality to it. Explanations can be in the form of nested hierarchies. In the end, all we have are the relationship of measured things and incomplete descriptions. A person is always a composite creature, depending on what he is connected to. Right action is measured in the heart of every man. His skill in determining right action will vary from man to man. The consequences ripple through history, sometimes in a smooth, calm fashion and sometimes as a tumultuous storm. A perfectly symmetrical, in terms of relationships, input of sensory data would essentially be random noise with no differentiation from any of your senses. So, we could say that perception creates a differentiation and all sufficiently complex events are statistically impossible, they are all one-time events. In assuming this, we must add the degrees of precision the brain will use to process the data. Next, the brain will add expectation values to the data to create a best guess, and voila, you have cognition. Since all sufficiently complex events are statistically impossible, does cognition round off the statistical impossibility of a complex event? If we are in a simulation, there might be processing limitations involved. The symmetry of the potential of the boundary condition of time has a fractal quality such that the forward direction of time does not mirror the reverse direction of time. This difference gives a behavior that we think of as acceleration or gravity. The symmetry of the potential of the boundary condition of time varies with scale and resolution. So we should expect these behaviors to follow a power scaling law in some manner. These behaviors are constrained by the relationships in their reference frame, so the difference between forward time and reverse time varies with the reference frame. We can say that a behavior has location, but we cannot say exactly what an electron or a photon is, other than the fact that it has a very precise relationship in some form of a network. Scale is the new up. When desire sleeps, it is but a subtle influence. When desire awakens, it drives the world and everything in it in ways that are too sublime and terrible to imagine. Mostly, anything intangible is profoundly absurd. Our perception becomes increasingly filtered over time. This is the opposite of innocence. Our only chance at discovery is to nurture imagination. Reason is the servant of all of the higher levels of awareness. No aha moment is ever the product of pure reason. Nothing can harm you, you have nothing to worry about, nothing will happen. Sounds good, yes. This thing we call nothing is the outer darkness of the great beyond, and is, in a sense, nonsense. Adolescence is that period of time when your brain is frantically building up layers of filters in order to try and make sense of the world around you. If a system is sufficiently complex, all we can do is tweak the parameters, run it in real time, and watch what happens. Immortality does not necessarily need to be static, but it must include some form of harmonious relationship. Did God have a choice in creating the universe? If he took a static law which is perfect and applied a dynamic principle to it, this generating set would create meaning and values that are precise and in the end would not be a zero-sum game. Emergent relationships and the differentiation of meaning in nested hierarchies. Truth as a precise relationship in a dynamic system. General relativity in state space. Is gravity behaving like a strange attractor in state space? You are spirit. You are made of stuff, but the stuff is something that cannot be regarded as real. The information is not the structure, it is the relationships. The information contains no mass. An instant is a theoretical object, nothing happens in an instant, same with a point. If an infinity were frozen in time, what would it look like? Question everything. What do we really know? Existence is some form of phenomena. There is something rather than nothing. Behaviors are repeatable to some degree of resolution. Everything is moving and the relationships are always changing. There is a principle of organization involved, but over time everything tends to disorder. Many of the things that grown-ups have chosen to ignore, the child perceives and ponders deeply. Along our path lingers a scent, it is the leftover expressions imparted to the world by your passing. Some people leave a sweet fragrance and others a foul stench. You are responsible for the odor you leave in your wake. Now is a mirror precisely positioned between the past and the future, and it is reflecting in both directions. The surface of this mirror has imperfections, and so the reflections cannot faithfully match either the past or the future. There is always a slight variation. The randomness imposed by the imperfections has a fractal quality with extreme sensitivity to initial conditions. It is not the mirror that is moving, it is the imperfections. In an infinite probability space, does mixing metaphors matter? The system is fragile because of human nature itself. A concept will last only as long as someone is available and willing to understand it. The fractal mirror of time is a kaleidoscope, the jewel at the heart of physics. What the precisions are I cannot say. Perhaps it is ratios. A rock does not need information to tell it how to be a rock. That is not how information works. The information is stored in the relationships that make up the rock. If the relationships were different, the rock would be different. We can rearrange the relationships of many things at many levels. If we scramble the relationships, what happens to the information? Sheldrake would suggest that new relationships, something the universe has never seen before, are resisted by some form of energy, morphic field, but as the arrangement becomes more common, at some point it becomes easier to produce. Everything is fields. If we are in a simulation, it is pointless to talk about the arrangement of the pixels on the screen. A computational mapping of possibilities is linked to a system that measures value and meaning against effort and application. The geometry includes nested hierarchies, an interconnected network of associations, and the one thing that keeps the processes from locking up, self-referential noise. If the universe is a decision engine using pseudo-randomness to keep the computations from locking up, then we could ask, what is the purpose, or what is it trying to solve? Also, what is happening to the information as the process matures? What we are talking about is informed random walks in state space, like wisdom of the crowd. This involves fields that we have yet to identify. When you include the quantum domain, then you are talking about quantum random walks that are not constrained by space and time. The particle/wave duality has something to do with the nature of time. Time is intimately linked to information, you cannot separate them. Information moving in time always contains meaning. This meaning has a truth value. There is a dynamic nature to these truth values with application and material expressions. Experience relies on these expressions, it is the perception or division of the expression that creates the experience. How much we are able to understand varies from experience to experience. In the quantum world, these expressions have a probability. A fractal probability distribution. The holographic theory says that we are in two places at once. One of these places is a projection and it is essentially nowhere, and the other one is the hologram, which is essentially everywhere. You are smeared across the entire surface, so you could say that you are in that space between nowhere and everywhere. On a hologram, scale would be irrelevant. What would matter are things like the relationship of frequencies, patterns of interference and non-interference, etc. How could fields be generated on a hologram? A hologram stores information. This information is relational, the relationships describe the field, these fields are dynamic. So, does the surface of the hologram have extension into another dimension in space or in time? If this surface is dancing, the fiddler is self-referential noise. Truth is not inside of time, time is inside of truth. Truth is not inside of process, process is inside of truth. In terms of information, truth appears to be the most fundamental thing. Truth has the most symmetry, it looks the same from every angle, at every scale, and no one can prove the statement is incorrect. If the universe is holographic with a fractal feature such as experience and expression, fractal folding back into the hologram, then our understanding of scale needs to be drastically modified. To describe the fractal folding of information, if you have enough information to ask a pertinent question, you have enough information to answer it. Physics is a form of magic. No physics textbook remains relevant for more than 10 years. The physicist is the new wizard, it is a dark magic. We are children playing with nuclear fire. To find out what is really going on in the world, you have to take in information from as many different sources as possible, average it all out, down to an approximation, and hopefully, you will be in close proximity to the answer. This is wisdom of the crowd, but it only works with an informed source. I will use a manufacturing company as a metaphor to describe our reality. When we look at a company, there are many things going on. The less you understand it, the more chaotic it looks. The behaviors are both a consensus of the actors and a set of individual goals and depend on what the actor is connected to. Some behaviors will be very simple, push a button every hour, and the actor can be changed with no measurable difference, to some degree of resolution. Other behaviors are so complex that even if all the actors and all the other factors are the same, you will see a noticeable difference in behavior that cannot be predicted. Profit occurs in many layers and exists in the system in more than one way and in a sense, has a hierarchy. Profit to individuals, to teams, to the company as a whole. You could say that all profit is equal, but some profits are more equal than others. In a sense, profit and value are the same, and the system is healthiest when the value is maximized throughout the hierarchy. Novelty plays a key role in shaping the behaviors that emerge from the actors. This novelty comes from imagination. The value is intimately linked to meaning. If it doesn't apply, it doesn't have meaning. Life is a sustainable system of organization, using fields to retain a specific form. Microtubules read the field, inform and organize the material in the system. The material is an expression of the field. This field of information has potential, the potential is generating meaning or value. It appears to be coming from the spiritual realm. Now is a position in a fractal structure, which is essentially a computational structure and is the interface between the past and the future. It is the fractal folding and unfolding of information. The surface or interface has very slight variations that cause the information's dynamic, like a processor. If now is like a mirror, then the past informs the future and vice versa. If it is more like a window, then the future spills into the past with subtle variations that can never be predicted beyond some degree of resolution. The idea that everything can be computed and everything can be explained is flawed. The dynamics of the system do not allow for completeness. Partial descriptions will always be the norm. Truth as a logic structure is closer to simple, and the further away from simple you get, the deeper and more nuanced an explanation will become, until you reach a point where the energy is so high that no explanation is possible. The density of time, cognitive overload, and stress. There is a principle of balance. Humans are designed to experience life's ebb and flows. You cannot spend all of your time at the high end of the spectrum. Make time for everything in moderation. Small children believe that unless you lock eyes with them, you can't see them when they close their eyes. It turns out that they know, you can see their feet or other parts of the body. The first conclusion would be that the child is naive, but this is not the case. The child believes that their essence, spirit, or true self is not in their body. This belief is common among all young children. This is the same idea as, the eyes are the window to the soul. Truth is about meaning and application. It is also about getting your head, heart, and feet all moving in the same direction. What we value matters, and the more we understand, the more alive we are. The reason you can't walk through a wall is not because of particles, it is because of fields. If you were only particles, you wouldn't exist, but you could walk through the wall the same way two galaxies can pass right through each other. When Rutherford discovered the nucleus of the atom, what he really found was another, smaller version of a field. Just like bouncing a tennis ball off the wall, the interaction is because of a field. What we think of as a particle is a packet of energy that can combine or interface with the environment in some way. The behavior has location, but we cannot say whether the material, particle, has location. The material could in fact just be an illusion caused by our incomplete understanding. The human brain is a fractal antenna that could in fact be reading fields that we don't even know about. These fields, if they exist, would be quantum in nature. As an example, migrating birds, photosynthesis, and quantum random walks in state space. Beauty is a curious mix of geometry and randomness and is perceived more by the heart than the head. Questioning a man's philosophy won't get you in trouble as fast as exposing the flaws in his self-narrative. Backward causation might be better explained as read ahead. A fractal probability distribution is not purely random, it is complex and chaotic, but not purely random. Nothing is. The definition of definitions is an infinite network of associations. In an infinite probability space, all behavior is possible, but not all behavior is expedient. Inside the Mandelbrot set is the non-computable region. The region is finite, but the boundary is infinite. There is a bifurcation of expression. Everything inside the infinite boundary is part of the set, and everything outside of the boundary escapes and is thrown into the outer darkness. Entanglement could be a wave-like behavior propagating in a superfluid, where dimensions are a computational entity and measurement is an exchange of information in the system. The number of behaviors that can be contained in a region of space is proportional to the force of gravity in that region. It is the folding of information into a region of space that contains a holographic horizon where all of the information is stored, but because the horizon is colliding with other horizons, the information is mixing and becoming entangled. How much of the original form remains depends on the fields involved. The singularity or folding of information into a maximum compression generates another behavior, possibly spin. The event horizon is evidence of maximum compression. When we talk about isolated event horizons, we are referring to a particular time scale. At the scale of galaxies, very long time scales are involved, and at the scale of atoms, time scales and isolation are very much shorter. All behavior is governed by fields generating forms. Information folds into and out of the hollow movement as a form of computational geometry. The particles U and behavior. We are cataloging behaviors. In the quantum realm, there is a minimum amount of space, time, energy, or behavior, and as these behaviors combine, you get very complex unpredictable behavior and emergence. These behaviors can be expressed as geometries, computations, networks of relationships, or interactions of something like particles. Our explanations are just like the blind men and the elephant. DNA is using some form of quantum computation that is so sophisticated that we are having trouble understanding it or even recognizing that it exists. Material expressions that result from these molecular communications are really the new frontier. The high end of computation will be in organic material, not silicon. Truth has three components: simplicity, application, and meaning. Beauty lies at the boundary of the non-computable region and the outer darkness. This fractal boundary is infinite. Meaning lies in that space between stasis and chaos. Measuring the coastline of England is a great metaphor for describing the fractal nature of information. With a very large ruler we will always get the same answer, about 7,723 miles, but as we move to finer and finer scales the answer begins to fluctuate between some range that continues to increase as we move to finer scales. At some point the dynamics, nuance, or level of description becomes so energetic that no answer is possible and the meaning is lost. The world is a labyrinth of ideologies that are, for the most part, educated guesses. Truth always appears to be just out of reach but close enough to get a sense of it. Mingled into every perceived experience is the dithering of random noise the brain uses for processing, and so every truth has a bit of randomness. Meaning is built from this process. You are almost never in a position to defend truth, any truth. You are moving through a network of associations, where meaning and understanding fluctuate. Perception and understanding move together, and are, in a sense, a division of the hollow movement. A division of time creates conscious moments. These moments are part of a nested hierarchy. Our experience cannot be contained in any particular level of this hierarchy. Our experience is smeared across many levels. The multidimensional experience is at times thin at one level and thicker in another, very much like the surface of the ocean when you broaden or narrow your scope. If we can describe all behaviors as computations on a system that displays both holographic and fractal features, what does this say about motion and energy, acceleration being of particular interest? I would suspect that the level of description continues to increase proportional to the acceleration. As a computation, the resistance would occur as a result of the processor reaching some upper limit. The holographic nature of physical reality would suggest that, without sufficient resolution, a behavior cannot be manifest. As an example, an image of a small object on a holographic plate is stored everywhere on the plate. However, if we cut the plate down to a small enough piece, there is no longer enough resolution remaining to represent the object. All behaviors fall within some particular range. Over many iterations, this range always tends towards infinity unless some organizing principle is involved. Profound beauty is very much like profound truth, in that there is a harmony or balance between the many elements or dimensions involved. Our connection to both beauty and truth are possibly the gossamer strands of subjectivity that are both undefinable and fragile. A careful analysis of either beauty or truth will only diminish their quality. This would suggest that mystery is one of the dimensions. An infinite fractal boundary versus pixels on a screen. With the fractal, as you zoom in, it is just more of the same. With the pixels, as you zoom in, if we are talking about a hologram, at some point, you will be left with only one pixel to represent the entire image. The universe is a musical composition, in that, there are relationships between the intensity, duration, and frequency as a nested hierarchy. These relationships contain meaning that is read by all of the constituent parts within the sphere of influence. Consonance is very different from dissonance, but both are required for expression. The quality varies, and for sentient beings this quality is given value. Man was not created merely to survive. Survival is not the engine of life, meaningful expression is. Certainty lives inside of simplicity, simplicity lives inside of truth. Every sufficiently complex event is statistically impossible. Any repeatable behavior that we can measure with great precision would, by necessity, be closer to simple, and that makes it closer to truth. Because the event horizon stores all of the information within its volume, and the position of the event horizon is determined by gravity, there must be a correlation between gravity and information. A description of a black hole is very much like a description of the Mandelbrot set. The event horizon and the infinite boundary being equivalent. Consciousness could also be described by these features. The universe is one thing describing itself as an infinitely nuanced hierarchy. Degrees of freedom versus levels of description in a system. The system must use a principle of organization to combine or unify the behavior of a collection of the constituent parts, so that an emergent behavior will manifest. The degrees of freedom for the collection is less than the degrees of freedom for the sum of the parts without this organization. This is true of physical laws and consciousness. We cannot describe the behavior until we reach a scale where we can see the collective organization. This is when the information about the behavior emerges. Principles of organization can exist at many levels in the hierarchy. When robots require a psychologist, then we will have reached a level where we can talk about AI. The reason is complexity and emergence. To be sentient requires a level of complexity we don't understand. People are not precise, no one is. If you don't believe me, try asking for complex instructions to some task. Every person will weigh the information, give you what they feel is relevant to but not to the point of exhaustion, and will assume you can figure out the difference. If they are being thorough, they will still stop at some level of description because the nuance involved may simply be too deep. The reason I have written my loose confederation of ideas in the manner I have chosen is, to describe the ideas from as many angles as possible. No, one angle could give a complete enough picture, there are simply too many dimensions. The geometry of emotion is more prevalent and more powerful in qualia space. The shape may be some form of fractal antenna, reading fields in the quantum or spiritual realm. The boundary between the non-computable region and everything outside of the set is not an infinitely thin line, it is a region that has depth and density. The geometry of a conscious moment is a structure, this structure represents a concept and cannot be divided. It constrains the previous version to a finite arrangement just as it does the next version, each in turn strobing from one to the next at about 100 milliseconds. This maximal irreducible conceptual structure is a fractal of a larger more complete structure, that is a fractal of an even larger more complete structure, that is probably strobing at a different cycle rate. Each conscious moment is unique because your mind has filtered out anything superfluous from the whole. The mind is never still, what is fluctuating is awareness. Each conscious moment is a collection of things that can't be separated, except by another conscious moment. It seems strange, that a conscious moment could include both the past and the future, but this is correct. The past and future are both constrained by a fractal probability distribution. When organic material is completely programmable, everything will change. This organic matter will be exquisitely efficient at reading fields that we don't even know about. The conceptual structure has a fractal nesting such that, there is never any real separation but a continuous rearrangement of associations. Awareness is dependent on the levels of description associated with the nested structure. It is only irreducible to some resolution, these various components are chosen by the reticular activating system and give the awareness. At the same time, another level of processing or integrated association is going on at the subconscious level, to some degree of resolution. These fractal arrangements could be acting like antennas reading fields in the quantum realm. Systems and subsystems processing, the subconscious mind processes information coming in at different cycle rates, vision has longer cycles than hearing. When presented to the conscious mind, the information is synchronized, the species present. There are different computational geometries involved. For the subconscious mind, it is probably not possible to have a maximally irreducible conceptual structure because of the holographic nature of the fractal hierarchy. Awareness would be by necessity, a synchronization of the disparate information collected in the subconscious, a controlled illusion. We are talking about an information system in which the material expression is the arrangement of fields with many features including nested frequencies. The sensation of self, inner feelings, is part of a feedback mechanism for navigating the world. Without this, the organism would have no reference frame. This process exists in some form all the way down to single-cell organisms and perhaps even beyond. The possible states of the system have a geometry. If the system were a guitar, how many possible states could the guitar be in? Each of the 6 strings can generate many overtones at various volumes as well as the body of the guitar, and so, the number of states is going to be very high. No point in time would be a discrete arrangement. Just like a song, the past, the now, and the future are woven into each other. This would have to be the same for each conscious moment. Our reality is the mental becoming material. This happens through action, it is action that counts. For example, I can think about creating a new life all I want, but no new life will emerge. If I want to create a new life, this will require action. Needs are islands of stability in a sea of wants. One possibility, the future is part of a fractal computational geometry. Second possibility, read ahead or quantum random walk in state space. If the universe itself is behaving like a mind, it is looking at possibilities. These material expressions are, in fact, fields, a particular arrangement, transferring information through association and nested hierarchies. Imagination drives explanation. An exponential growth in technology will not last forever, it will peak and then fade. If we are lucky enough to survive it, we have placed a courageous guard around the idea of explanation and in so doing have cut off the path that would lead to understanding. Dynamic problems require dynamic solutions. There are no perfect symmetries, there is no pure randomness. Brownian motion does not describe quantum fluctuations correctly, it is a small boat on a choppy sea. The motion is a pseudo-randomness, because as soon as it becomes a material expression it has entered the space between perfect symmetry and pure randomness, which are only ideals. The distinction between the quantum and classical world is not discrete. Systems are nested hierarchies. The more understanding you have, the better able you are to address the issues that will matter most. Evolution of belief systems and issues of control. If something is worth believing in, it is timeless. The heart is more important than the head when it comes to achieving greatness. For the average task, only the intellect is needed, but a great challenge will require heart and soul. Imagination is the connecting of disparate things in novel ways. If the universe is an information system, we are connected to only a very small part of the spectrum, and from this, we must deduce the entire system. This will not be easy. Holograms and fractals, resolution and scale, relationships and context, the pilgrim and the journey, truth and chaos, darkness and light, these are the currency of understanding. Symmetry is an operation without a difference, but I will argue that in a holographic universe with fractal properties, every operation will produce a difference, however small. Our quantum random walks is state space capable of measuring value in some manner. There is an organizing principle in operation that we have yet to discover, and if value is involved, this raises some interesting questions. Time is process, and can have more than one dimension. With consciousness, more is different. Critical thinking is the best education. Do not teach children to parrot facts they could easily look up, teach them how to think. If you don't know what is going to work best, do not get lazy, find out and teach it. The quantum realm is not ones and zeros, it is a fractal probability distribution, and the material world is constructed from a more is different principle of organization. You are unique, you are a very precise arrangement of possibilities. You live as that space between possible and impossible, and your journey is the bridge. The mathematical description of the Planck scale is based on assumptions that are, so far, unproven. We may very well find that as we move to finer scales, there are an astonishing variety of behaviors that have no bottom. What we think of as natural law is an organizing principle that is scale dependent. You are precisely positioned between two worlds that don't exist, the world of perfect symmetry and the world of pure randomness. Every engine takes advantage of a difference. The structure of reality is a computational geometry that is fractal in nature. Truth is the highest energy state of the system. We are branching out in a fractal pattern into uncertainty. What we value matters, meaning is generated in a nested hierarchy. The intellect will only get you so far, beyond this are things like desire. Desire is a higher level of processing, it is deeper and more nuanced. There is something beyond the emotional realm that I will call spirit. As an organizing principle, spirit has the ability to transcend space and time and generates value and meaning that have harmonious relationships that keep the system going. Without harmony and some principle of organization, time or process would end. If we were wise, we would not build computers that think like we do. Fortunately, we can't build computers like that, yet. Science can answer many questions, why is not one of them? Science is not in the business of assigning value to anything. Just because we can do it doesn't mean we should do it. We could ask, did God have a choice in creating the universe? Or we could ask, did the universe have a choice in creating itself? You can see how the really big questions very quickly become subjective. How do natural systems find balance? They have no choice, it is either balance or oblivion. The simple answer is, you don't have all the answers, in some areas you are going to have to wing it. Time has a quality, when you frame an event in time you impart some of this quality to the event. A good example, I'd rather be a lion for one day than be a sheep for 1,000 years. The quality that time imparts to the statement can be thought of as very valuable for one day and not so much for 1,000 years, but notice this connection to control. Does the lion have any more control than the lamb? What if we have deceived ourselves and it is behavior and not control that ends up mattering? The lion goes about being a lion and the lamb is always sheepish. Control is the illusion, neither ever really had control, they had a role to play. A dance of mutual expression, framed in time. Light does not experience time, we are creatures of light. You are limited to a particular range of behaviors, your destiny is obscured by shadow, light can guide but it can also blind. A great light will illuminate your path well if that is where it is pointed, but if we try to turn it inward it must be much more subtle. Preparation for the journey is but a small part of the journey. The computational geometry of space/time is fractal. The entire system is interwoven as a fractal, and as each series of iterations occur, there is a dithering of sorts because the difference in possibilities can be metastable in many locations in the computation. Each layer of the system computes in a frequency that is probably following the phi ratio. Measurement is always described as ratio, and scale may be, in a sense, an illusion. Light appears to be scale invariant and the cut-off frequency may be another illusion. If this is true, everything is fields and particles are just a smaller version of a field. The space-filling properties of consciousness. All dimensions are equal but some are more equal than others. The expansion of space/time may very well behave like a fractal where each iteration produces finer but exponentially more stuff. Culture is herd mentality, creativity lives in the fringes. The system is so complex that I have had to abandon my faith in the so-called experts. We are all, every one of us, amateurs. As the complexity in any system increases, the ability to form a correct understanding decreases exponentially. Your beliefs determine which genes are read out and expressed to some extent. The best evidence of unsophisticated ideas is the behavior that follows. All of the information coming from your senses is gathered, sorted, synchronized, and presented to the conscious mind along with associations from memory, assessment of any values, projections for the future and some form of experiential meaning. The system uses fuzzy logic and some form of dithering to hasten the decision-making process. We have assumed that the fundamental nature of reality is something we can explain and understand. But it wouldn't surprise me if underneath it all is an incomprehensible mystery. While we continue to get closer to the truth, really what humanity has been doing all this time is squaring the circle. When someone speaks to me from their head, I might listen but am often sidetracked. When they speak to me from their heart, I pay attention. Time, gravity, the stretching out of space and the second law of thermodynamics are linked in a manner which has yet to be described. If the expansion of the universe is speeding up, this could mean that the degrees of freedom in the outer fractal hierarchy is increasing, Fredkin's paradox. If the nature of the universe is indeed digital, then what the speed of light defines for us may be the processor speed. If it is a hologram with fractal features, time will have nested cycles. The resolution of a system defines the limits of any value assigned to it. Infinity could be the changing value inside of a cycle, possibly fractal reiterations. At the finest scale, we end up back at unity, each point represents the whole. Stretching space affects time and gravity. Frames of reference are scale dependent. Information can be folded and unfolded into nested hierarchies. Emergent behaviors have less degrees of freedom than their constituent parts. All behaviors are constrained by the universe itself, beyond this lives only the imagination. Sound does travel through the vacuum, however, it is the faintest of whispers. Particles are the properties of space/time itself. It is information folding and unfolding within nested hierarchies and associations. The geometries evolve into emergent behaviors. There are organizing principles involved such as, nature is lazy, it likes to copy. The largest thing we know of is an arrangement of information, so is the smallest thing we know of. Stretching space affects time and gravity. Frames of reference are scale dependent. Information can be folded and unfolded into nested hierarchies. Emergent behaviors have less degrees of freedom than their constituent parts. We know that 90% of the information we have access to is wrong and about 10% is correct, but which 10%? The intellectual realm is usually not too difficult to navigate. Most people find their niche and naturally fall into an area where they can do pretty well. The emotional realm is deeper and much more nuanced, behaviors ripple out into the landscape in ways we would never imagine. It takes a very long time to perfect the kind of emotional intelligence that creates win-win scenarios as a general course of action. The spiritual realm is so nuanced and so deep that few navigate this landscape without upsets, wrong turns, misunderstandings and a sense of one's own hypocrisy. There are very few superstars in the arena of spirituality. I would also guess that being spiritual, for the most part, is not highly valued in our society. Also, there is little consensus on what constitutes spirituality. As I have stated, it is a deeply nuanced realm that does not give up its secrets easily. You have to want it, you have to work at it, and most importantly, you have to care. Anything worthy of passion requires effort. The intellect is fine for the average task, but a great challenge will require heart and soul. Imagine AC current as a scalar wave. If time has a three-dimensional component, then it could oscillate at a particular scale and frequency such that there would be continuous motion in each direction of propagation, although the value or strength of the field would behave like a transverse wave. Why is low-hanging fruit so appealing? Passion lives in the top of the tree. The energy of a particular sound spreads out into the medium that carries it as finer and finer influences until they are so small they can no longer be distinguished from the background noise and essentially become unified with it. Could space/time be concentrated as a nested torus? Could matter be a geometry of space/time itself? Can a chain reaction be described as the sudden unwinding of a feature of space/time? We would have to lay a groundwork before attempting to have a meaningful discussion of any very complex subject. The nature of God would be a good example. If we want to describe God from a particular perspective, we could choose from a variety of sources, or we could ask what would be the most likely characteristics. I think God would be intimately associated with law. These laws might include a static principle controlling a dynamic association. The more sophisticated the law, the more harmonious the associations. All of the information we have access to comes from either our own observations or the observations of some other flawed creature, and so, we should not be surprised if we can't completely describe gravity or consciousness, and we can't come to some agreement on things like religion and politics. Suspension of disbelief in the dream state. You do not have access to logical thinking unless you are having a lucid dream. This is a very interesting aspect of consciousness. Why don't we realize that some particular aspects of our dreams are untenable? A robust computational geometry self-organizes, creating novel time dilations that approaches infinity. The flexibility of time in random walks involves harmonic oscillations of the holographic structure following the phi ratio. The flexibility of time is scale-dependent. Particles and relativity. A particle is the collapse of a particular dimension or dimensions of space/time curling into a compact toroidal structure. As we approach the speed of light, all of the photons reaching our position move in front of us in a tunnel that narrows as we reach light speed. This geometric phenomena is probably repeated at all scales. The universe is ringing like a bell. This suggests that scale is not precise, it is relative. Everything is an approximation of something else because fractals simulate higher dimensions. This includes physical reality and phase space. Does mystery have a purpose? Without mystery there would be no wonder left in the world. To see the division of consciousness, look at children. To see the reunification of consciousness, look at an old married couple. With the hard problem, consciousness, we are trying to describe a geometry. This geometry will include time. Time has not been properly described. I will throw out two names, Nassim Haramein and Gavin Wince. I think the ideas of both of these men may lead to new discoveries. Stuart Hameroff suggests that consciousness can be described in musical terms. In other words, it is more like a song. This idea has merit. The structure of a song requires very precise relationships, but also, there is a freedom of variation. This is going to be very difficult to describe mathematically. We might try to imagine that scale is relative and that time has a nested hierarchy of cycles, or maybe time has more dimensions than we thought. We cannot spend too much time looking for the answers when we haven't found the question. A Fourier transform of the cosmic microwave background radiation shows the universe is ringing like a bell. Good music is deeply nuanced. The universe behaves more like a song than an equation. This idea of particles is troubling. Probably a particle is an emergent phenomenon. For time to be reversible, emission requires a wave-like properties and absorption requires a particle-like properties. The value of trust is very much like the value of dignity. Something from nothing is a miracle any way you slice it. Truth is the law and time is the process of explanation. As the explanation is passed around, it is changed, and the further from truth we get, the more dynamic the process becomes. No relationship is absolute and discrete, it is resolution that creates this illusion. When two bodies fall towards each other, resolution and scale are important. Let's say a bowling ball is falling towards the earth is also pulled by the mass of the bowling ball, but until the earth can move at least one Planck length in 1 unit of Planck time, the earth will not be moved. The mass of the bowling ball would have to be increased until the mass reaches a particular level to bridge the quantized steps that would allow the earth to move 1 Planck length. This reminds me of the photon's discrete steps. The past and the future are woven together. This moment has more value than most realize. Much of success is about this moment. Our reality is a blend of the impossible becoming possible. The wisest see the interconnectedness of all things at every scale, and from this, choose the things that create the most value. The photon is a particle and a wave. This is the same as saying I know which illusions are real. Truth is the most secure foundation that you can build on. Quantization is the harmonic relationship of a fractal topology. What we value matters. We become what we are connected to. We are not material creatures having a spiritual experience, we are spiritual creatures have a material experience. The reason we are here is to learn how to love. In the material world, information does not move in a linear fashion, and all of the rules depend on relationships. Fuzzy logic is a fundamental property of the universe. This upsets the dogmatic pragmatist. To no end. I am under no obligation to provide any answers because, I am not looking for the answers, I'm looking for the questions. Symmetry, dynamics, and perpetual motion, information is a difference that can make a difference. Understanding is life, islands of order in a sea of chaos. Perception creates division. The engine is imagination and the fuel is novelty. Innocence is unfiltered perception. We live in the shadows of perception where all belief systems are filters. Meaning is created through this process. In order to create meaning, something must be consumed. Light pierces the darkness and is consumed, truth pierces the chaos and is consumed. The universe behaves more like a song than an equation. How can location exist in a song? We can give behaviors location, beyond that we cannot say. All of time converges on this one moment, all of space, on this one location. When computers can write poetry that touches the soul deeply, only then, can we call it AI. Unless you want to call it augmented intelligence. The human body, your body, is islands of order in a sea of chaos. At the finest scale you cannot differentiate your body from the probability waves all around you. We inhabit a world of information. This information has qualities that extend beyond our ability to describe them. This is a multidimensional probability space with fractal features. We can describe behaviors to some level of description. If you assume that an entangled pair of photons only has some number of influences guiding their behavior and the behavior does not support this, then you will need a deeper level of description. You will very quickly reach a level of description where the energies are so high that no description is possible. We do not have the moral will or the moral skill to navigate the world we now find ourselves in. We do, however, have the capacity for great destruction. The computational geometry of the reality we perceive has two formats: the tree of knowledge, fractal, and the tree of life, also a fractal. The academic world is only focusing on the former and the elite seem to be very interested in the later. Resolution and scale become important along with the dynamics of complexity involved. Your perception boils down to what you value and what you are connected to. The simulated reality we are in is the tree of knowledge, so which part of this knowledge can we trust in? The tree of life is the best place to put your trust. We live in the shadows of perception. We are made of stuff, but this stuff is something that cannot be regarded as real. All of these geometries are metaphors of something else, the spiritual realm. It is all information. The fractal is a trinity of a trinity of a trinity of a trinity, etc. The integration of information and vulnerabilities move together. Variation at the cosmic scale has large regions of homogeneity or voids. At the scale of galaxies there is more fluctuation and many more nested hierarchies within the region of the galaxies. As we continue to finer scales, the nesting of variation becomes denser and denser. The denser the region, the deeper the levels of description. In other words, how much information is needed to describe a particular region of space/time. The ratio of the homogeneous regions to the regions with lots of variation is very high. This is a fractal nesting of information. It is not the digital horizon that prevents Zeno's paradox, it is the dithering of self-referential noise. This tiny speck of the universe, humanity on the Earth, is generating information at an exponential rate. Whether this is happening elsewhere in the universe is unknown at this time. Quantization and time. Light is separated by discrete frequencies. These frequencies are related to time in a different way than its speed passing a certain point in space. Think instead of a variation past a certain point in time. I would suspect that time is behaving differently with these different frequencies. This is a relationship of precise ratios, something like harmonic nesting. Einstein believed that space was smooth and continuous. This quantization is one of relationships, and space/time is more like a fractal nesting of harmonic ratios and chaotic ratios. The phase transitions of matter always occur at the boundary or criticality at the edge of chaos. Time may have more dimensions than we thought. The real revolution in AI will come from organic computers. When we start building computers out of organic material, everything will change. The reason: these computers will be able to read fields we don't even know about. The human brain uses a mapping of associations. When you perform the same operation over and over, your brain is building a map. There should already be something in place to monitor disruptive technologies in a way that we are able to prevent the disasters they are going to create. Change is inevitable, but at this point in history, it is also exponential. The larger and more integrated a system, the slower it is to respond to change, and so we are in for a hell of a ride, no question. All of the most important information should be free to the public. This idea of creating hype to sell a book or a service mainly helps the author. The purpose is book sales, and the benefit to the reader is a second-order affair. In other words, any perceived benefit could be real or an illusion. What is important is how often these fads come and go with no real benefit to society as a whole. I really don't need to know how Tony Robbins got rich if I have to give him money to find out. I do not measure wisdom by the wealth that has been concentrated for his benefit unless there is an even greater benefit to society. The material world is transient. There are more important things to consider. When a religious system or a government organizes into a bureaucracy, it is the bureaucracy that incessantly moves all activities increasingly and inevitably towards its own destruction. The momentum will always become greater than the influence of its wisest members. We are here for one and only one reason: we are supposed to learn how to love. We will not achieve this through war. Is there no one among you with the wisdom to keep chaos at bay? The collective wisdom of humanity will not suffice. When our theories continually move us into more and more complicated explanations, then it is certain that we are moving in the wrong direction. It is important to note just how much deception is required in social interactions. The higher the strata, the higher the stakes and the more important the deception. If the structure of the universe is information or consciousness, then the quality of the source would be, by necessity, harmonious, pure, or maybe something like a loving God. This would bring up the question of evil. If there is evil in the world, the connection to love is through free will. Without free will it is not possible to make a bad choice. With free will the possibilities are only limited by the imagination. The cutoff frequency for light is related to two phenomena: the source will always have a range of very specific frequencies, and the stretching out of space, there is a relationship with time and the stretching out of space. Scale is relational and the only constant is ratio. Value and bureaucracy, what we value matters. At the individual level, you will have small fluctuations, and as the group size increases, you get a more is different principle of organization. At some point, like earthquakes, we are going to see the big one. A large bureaucracy is very much like a large bomb, it can do a lot of damage. Much better to compartmentalize the distribution of power, but this too is very likely to fail over time because there are always opposing forces trying to find balance. Ideology will not fix anything, only understanding can do this. The level of understanding required to fix the mess we are in is beyond the scope of human comprehension. Essentially, evil is a lack of understanding. The more you understand, the more alive you are. Without understanding, you are dead inside. All of the chaos and hatred is being created by a kind of zombie mentality. The fabric of reality is continually being woven into a tapestry of meaning. In the more is different principle of organization, the degrees of freedom are reduced in the collective, in relationship to the sum. This creates a field that I will refer to as the intentional field of implicate order. The idea here is that the range of behaviors is reduced to an optimal set. There are as many definitions for success as there are people. Nothing has the power to destroy like secrets in high places. Trust is so important, why would anyone think manipulation is even an option? Agendas create illusions. Life has complexities that cannot be described so easily. Do you feel an urgent need to be useful to others? That is not why we are here. You are a partner in a dance of mutual expression. Process divides truth, through self-referential noise, perception divides process. Human interaction should be more like a dance than a game of chess. What is the purpose of competition? If it is to create desire? Desire doesn't need any help. Is it to motivate others? If so, what is the agenda? I have to place my desires into context with my community and hopefully there will be a good fit. Balance is essential. We have to use dimensions to describe relationships. There is more than one type of dimension. Spatio-temporal dimensions, hierarchical or nested dimensions, and a range of associations that vary according to stable rules and rules that have fluctuation. There are also abstract dimensions such as value. Now imagine trying to create a map that has all of these properties. That is what your brain does to make sense of and navigate the world. There is also the additional function, Buridan's donkey, otherwise choices would take far too long. The predictability of behaviors depends on the level of complexity. A highly complex range of associations can never be discrete. Therefore there is no digital representation that will reproduce all of the nuances. At best you can create an approximation of these systems. Don't forget that along with the relationship of connections, there is also a temporal component that uses frequencies of nested harmonic and discordant relationships that probably utilize the golden ratio because this ratio prevents interference. Did rules create behaviors or do behaviors create rules, or maybe it is some combination of these two? In the physical world, the operation of cause and effect break down at some resolution for reasons we don't yet understand. This would suggest that what we think of as a fundamental law is probably a different animal altogether. We are navigating a dynamic landscape. Behaviors range from simple to very complex, difficult to easy, important to unimportant, etc. What we value matters, we become what we are connected to. Observation from as many angles as possible and at every scale is essential. Also, it is better to have strong predictive abilities and understand the associations involved, which are often deeply nuanced. The structure of life is subtle forces in very specific geometric arrangements. Unmanifested possibilities in nested hierarchies, the intellect navigates a value landscape of tangible possibilities. Emotion navigates a value landscape of connected associations, some of these are tangible and some are ethereal and exist as nested hierarchies, with the intellectual component being just one of these. The spirit navigates a value landscape that includes both unity and infinity, an instant of time and eternity, certainty and all possibilities. Any expression of these things in the material world exist as fields. This idea of the abundant life being somewhat ethereal has merit. Think about the things that really make you happy. How many of these things had a tangible material quality? Probably very few of them. Understanding is the key to the abundant life. Gain understanding. The proper order is spiritual things, then the connection to loved ones, emotional, and at the bottom, material things. Education has been hijacked for the purpose of making money, not for giving the student the proper tools. We have reached the point where anyone can get access to information at little or no cost, and the type of information is much denser in terms of content. Credentials should already be free at this point. I would have to say that it will be very difficult to determine whether computational geometry or physical geometry is more fundamental. My suspicion would be computational, for the simple reason that, whenever we try to describe the relationship strictly in terms of material processes, we encounter paradoxes. The more elegant the explanation, the better the chance of being correct. Much of physics has become overly complex, hinting at the possibility that we are missing some essential clue. No source of information is unbiased, the quality of the information always exists as a continuum. There is variation with both the source and the receiver. The variation can only be constrained within some range depending on the levels of description. Information has an energetic potential and the variation is the dynamics of meaning within context at some particular resolution. As we move deeper into the explanations we encounter self-referential noise. This energetic potential can be so large at a particular depth that all of the meaning is lost. Gaining enough experience to be proficient at a given task versus acquiring credentials, is it validation that becomes so important? Why should credentials be so expensive? We have long passed the age of books and classrooms. This is a control issue. Harvard and Yale seem to me to just be a boot camp for the elite. I'm not down on learning, I'm down on suppressing learning. These very large bureaucracies are slow to react, change is the new norm. The distribution of resources must be managed well, the pool of talent is there, limiting resources would be a costly mistake. Consciousness requires criticality at the edge of chaos, not in one location but in a network of associations that have the property of harmonic and golden mean intervals in both time and location. Spirit is a realm where space, time, and scale are different. How well microtubules are able to read the fields from this realm are unknown at this time. An echo is an imperfect copy of the original, it is information but it is information from a different time and place. Light pierces the darkness and is consumed, truth pierces the chaos and is consumed. Every engine takes advantage of a difference. In order to give light, something must be consumed. If we are lucky, any art we produce will communicate with the emotions, and if we are very lucky, even the spirit. Perception is the ability to differentiate. Consciousness, the self, is your reference frame. To navigate the landscape, all creatures need a reference frame. No computer can do this. The geometry involved has not been figured out yet. Patterns of movement through the matrix, the implicit and the explicit, a swirling of possibilities, a yearning for something more. I don't know why I do that to myself, it is desire that is the greatest of mysteries. Your operating system is in need of an update. Prayer changes things. Most of the time, the gurus are just as wrong as everyone else. If we are in a simulation, then it is pointless to try and describe the relationship of the pixels on the display. In space-time, the wave is not just a wave, in many cases, it is a collection of nested frequencies, and the relationship of the frequencies is important. Things that endure in time have harmonious relationships and things that decay quickly do not. Patterns are used for predictions. We look for patterns so that we can better navigate the world. Their usefulness is in their predictive abilities. All patterns rely on a collective principle of organization. Resolution and scale become important. The patterns only emerge as a collection of random behaviors that organize as the collection increases. Different scales contain different patterns, and at a particular scale in any system no pattern is detectable. Reality can best be described as a complex information system. The information has several qualities. If we think about how the various components of the system interact, a picture begins to emerge. Competition is not good or bad, but it does have a space in the system where good outcomes are highest. We just need to figure out where that space is, and the same thing applies to cooperation. Stupid is unpredictable, but unpredictable is not necessarily stupid. The best gauge for stupid is its effect on the health of the system. Stupid has this quality of always being destructive, messy, unhealthy, and pointless. Time as a series of events in relationship to one another. A man is standing next to a railroad track and a flat car goes by with another man bouncing a ball on it. The man next to the track sees the ball moving in great sweeping arcs, 20 feet, while the man on the flat car sees the ball moving straight up and down, 3 feet. So how far is the ball moving with each bounce? That is relativity. The time of the ball is seen differently by each man. There is movement in both time and space for the ball, but for each man the relationship between them is different. Acceleration is not involved with respect to the train, that would be a difference within a difference. Anything with an endurance in time must, by definition, contain harmonious properties. As always, the main problem will be interpretation. The interferometry image of an atom is a frozen moment in time, measurement, which is always incomplete. As an example, we are given the impression from this image, that we have particles with location, but I can tell you that if we had a complete series of images, the apparent location would always be in motion in relationship to something else and would appear to be very wave-like. Pay it forward generates more value than tit for tat. The reason many of Tesla's projects were not funded is because his overconfidence caused him to become impractical. Arrogance is of no practical use in determining the nature of reality. It is my suspicion that the most fundamental thing is computational geometry. The more the ability or function of a system can be reduced, the less complex it becomes. At some point the complexity will become irreducible. This is always true, otherwise it is not complex. Our education system routinely trains imagination out of our children. The anthropic principle states that the universe itself is irreducibly complex. If the most fundamental thing is information, then anything we can say about reality will just end up being a metaphor. There are two possible explanations for Zeno's paradox. 1. There is a digital horizon. This explanation is a bit awkward, and 2. It is fractals all the way down. Think of the Mandelbrot set as an infinite structure in a finite space. Does evil exist? Is there evil in the world? If we replace the word evil with the word stupid, then the answer would be, yes. From my understanding, a block universe could not exist. The future unfolds in a manner that is not deterministic. It is complex, in fact, it is fractal. The best definition of self-esteem is not loving yourself, it is refusing to replay the negative tapes in our head. A musician who is connected to his instrument intellectually will sound like they're just playing scales. A musician who is connected to his instrument emotionally will sound like they're taking you on a journey. A musician who is connected to his instrument spiritually will transcend any limitations, thus creating something that cannot be described in words. Excellence requires commitment, commitment requires passion, passion requires values, values require spirit. The manifestation of physical structure has more to do with probabilities than particles, but the probabilities are fractal. Robust systems have a dynamic hierarchy of nested behaviors. How many moves ahead are you able to think when playing chess? How much effort are you willing to commit to understanding the deeply nuanced structure? Probably, success is not what you think it is. Adventures require novelty. Value has interesting surprises. Noticing stupid and enjoying stupid are not the same thing. Because of the internet, it has become very common for people to posture themselves as experts. The more dynamic information becomes, the less truth it contains. Meaning is built from this process. An irreducible conceptual structure would be a step in a process, but I will argue that the past, present, and future are woven together in a manner that causes scale and resolution to become the most important feature. There is a nested hierarchy of meaning. Something from nothing is a miracle any way you slice it. If there can be one miracle, there can be another. Now is not the time to become arrogant, we are only just beginning our journey of discovery. Removing accountability on a global scale is a recipe for disaster. Self-organization can take unsophisticated ideas to the gates of hell and beyond. There is a big difference between the stage magician and the wizard. The magician creates illusions in the real world and the wizard makes illusions real. The artificial intelligence we are dabbling with is a parlor trick by magicians. The wizards will use organic material to create artificial intelligence. The computational geometry of AI is based on a more is different principle of organization. Some of the elements are the same as conventional computing, and some are better described as nested hierarchies of associations. Music would be a good example of this idea. If you are listening to a song, there is no absolute distinction between the past, present and future, they are in a sense, woven together. A sound wave is a collection of nested frequencies acting upon each other, and the space that they occupy is filled with many variations or echoes of the source blending in ways that increase the complexity by orders of magnitude. The information contained in the song is both objective and subjective and depends on what you are connected to. It is not the job of the intellect to tame the passions of the heart, that is the job of the spirit. The intellect is best managed by the heart, without this connection you get the psychopath. The heart is best managed by the spirit, without this connection, you get the horrors of war. Organizing your life around material things is a very low bar. We have to get beyond the idea that stupid refers to intellectual stupidity. That is the mildest form of stupid and pales in comparison to emotional stupidity, which pales in comparison to spiritual stupidity. The subtle nuance of the human condition and the subtle use of power, the range of influences is infinite, the wisdom however is not. Information is becoming more and more powerful, and what we do with it will have the capacity to become more and more destructive. The more integrated information systems become, the more fragile they will be. Designing information systems that become more robust with each disruption is going to be tricky. If it's relational, there is a geometry involved, whether it is a computational geometry or a physical geometry is another question. Our models are very much like metaphors attempting to describe the relationship of the pixels on the display. We can say that behaviors have location, beyond that, we can't say much. All we have are the relationship of measured things and incomplete descriptions. The universe is governed by law, this law has its origin from outside our time domain. Contract law and free will, if there is a God and he has a contract with us, being God, he would never break the contract, breaking the contract would have consequences. Free will implies the possibility to break the contract, with the consequence being obvious to anyone paying attention. This tree of the knowledge of good and evil is a metaphor of an engine that is losing meaningful relationships or value. This engine is generating novelty at the cost of harmonious regularity. In nature, a virus was isolated to a region, those days are long gone. The language of life should be restricted. Information is a difference that can make a difference. Life says that the difference can be measured as value. Ideas are like the planet itself, there are lots of gems but you have to dig for them. How does value live inside a process? What would be better, the first poem you ever wrote or the last one? What happened in the interim? Value, meaning and efficiency increased. Time is very much like a conversation. As long as we are both alive there is two-way interaction, but when one of us dies the conversation reduces to whatever information has been preserved, such as a letter, book, or video, and is only able to move in one direction. 2 explanations for the stuff in the universe. 1. Stuff is created by something more fundamental. 2. There is no stuff, everything coming into our 5 senses is an illusion. A bureaucracy can self-organize so that corruption is not only possible, it is guaranteed. If all light were entangled, 2 things might immediately happen. 1. All dimensions would collapse to 0. 2. Time would stop. According to Einstein's relativity. I think, time has more dimensions than we have been told. In other words, like space, time has 3 dimensions that are inversely relational to space. If it is relational, there's a geometry involved. Information is stored in the relationships. Meaning is a dance of mutual expression. Expression and experience are 2 sides of the same coin. Perception differentiates information, information is given value, value creates desire, desire creates intention, intention becomes expression, an echoing of possibilities. All belief systems are filters, innocence is unfiltered perception, a belief system is unnecessary. We are connected to our environment through belief. We shape this environment to some extent, depending on how much intention is involved. This is the intentional field, and just like a magnetic field, it is composed of many elements. If this were not so, we would have noticed it much more often. Like wisdom of the crowd, it is a collection of various perspectives. Truth has 3 components: simplicity, application, and meaning. Beauty lies at the boundary of the non-computable region and the outer darkness. This fractal boundary is infinite. Love is the material manifestation of the spirit, being a form of action that includes both shared experience and intimate disclosure. Belief systems are filters and perception is differentiation or division, so where is truth in all of this? Deception's role in value creation is a tricky subject. Value generators rely on connections, and death is a form of separation. This reality has the curious habit of moving us towards value no matter what the truth happens to be. Notice that the definition of value becomes all important. So there would be this idea that truth, however important it might be, is often at an angle or direction that is different from value, Buridan's donkey, and the engine or motivation is a movement towards a perceived value. The terrible truth and the beautiful lie. In the fitness landscape, we have fitness peaks and attractor basins of various geometries, with perception playing the role of differentiating these features. Everything is approximations, nothing is discrete. Choosing requires good timing, and here too, deception plays a role. Spirituality is the alignment of truth and value. Life is a principle of organization that is particularly concerned with value creation. Value is the perceived benefit in the process of choosing. Free will is a branching out of choosers into a system of networked associations. Love is a dance of complementary expression. Puzzles need solutions that require effort. If no effort's involved, it is not a puzzle. Wisdom is a higher state of value creation than intelligence. Many people pride themselves on being clever, not realizing that there is little or no benefit to themselves or anyone else. There are people in the world that would not score high on an IQ test that are amazingly wise. You probably know people like this. There are people that would score very high on an IQ test that are incredibly stupid. See, The Basic Laws of Human Stupidity, Carlo M. G. Palla. Wisdom is a composite or multidimensional aspect of the human condition. Value is the key feature. The better you understand value, the wiser you will become. What we value matters, we become what we are connected to. Some will say there is no magic in the world. Don't believe them, they are not experts. Consider this: by a single act you can create something so extraordinary, that it would take you a lifetime to explain it, a child. This child will contain one of the most remarkable things that exists in the universe, imagination. The energy contained in hatred is destructive, the energy contained in love is constructive. Whoever said God is a mathematician or an architect was not paying attention. The universe behaves more like a song than an equation. God is the great composer. A song contains mathematical relationships, but an equation does not contain a song. Information is folded into the holographic black hole, information is folded into a superfluid, in both cases light is involved. Is truth complex? No, truth relies on harmonious regularity in some form. Life is complex, containing both harmonious regularity and chaos. The universe itself is irreducibly complex. As a finely tuned system with many interrelated features, it cannot be reduced without destroying it. If we think of the system as a system of value creation, novelty comes into play, and since every variation could not possibly increase value, this system would most likely have to utilize dynamics to generate value with some form of byproduct that we cannot consider valuable. The ratio of valuable and non-valuable things would not be discrete. Variation in the system would invade every element of the system to some degree of resolution. When we try to describe logic, we find that our explanations are incomplete. When we try to describe the features of the universe, our explanations are always incomplete. We cannot say at this time that we will ever have a complete explanation. Can we say that mystery has value? In the world of experience, mystery does have value. Forget about religion, bear with me, I will explain. All belief systems are filters, innocence is unfiltered perception, a belief system is unnecessary, truth never survives these filters. Spirituality is not an achievement, it is a relationship. As Solomon said, all is vanity. Most of the world is very busy gathering for themselves any material wealth they can get, and the rest are working furiously to earn their way into paradise, all for nothing. Get wisdom, gain understanding. Wisdom is more precious than fine gold tried in fire. We are free moral agents, remember who you are. Dogmatic belief cuts across every dimension of the human condition, no one is an expert, we are all, every one of us, amateurs. Your Creator wants to have a relationship with you. The ball is in your court. The more ignorance or arrogance you possess, the less likely you are to succeed. In the spiritual world, success is measured in souls. In politics, the goal is control. Those that control the definition steer the culture as they please. Money spent on education and money spent on prisons is inversely proportional. Unfiltered perception and unlimited wisdom are unstoppable. Our only connection to truth is in the echoes of creation, and there is no way back to the place where it came from. The small child has a better position in regards to perception, and over time the wise gain understanding. Justice is destroyed by that curious feature of the human condition called greed. The only defense is accountability. Once balance is gone, tipping points become inevitable. Expectation colors experience. Ignorance is no excuse for not remembering who we are creatures of light. Ignorance is no excuse for failing to notice the wonders all around us. Value is an emergent property in state space. In the beginning, the universe was balanced between harmonic regularity and self-referential noise. In this metastable condition, space was at maximum compression and time was at maximum expansion. The result was a phase transition of space/time. This could be considered an oscillation on a cosmic scale. Process is a differentiation of meaning from simple truth at one extreme and self-referential noise at the other. If we wanted to create a set of rules to write a musical composition that was meaningful and efficient, what rules would we use? Music is the universal language, music is the language of the soul. Value is relational and depends on what you are connected to. In the movie The Matrix, everything was an illusion, even Zion, the architect, etc. Each had a role to play, many had a sense of control, this too was an illusion. Awareness branches out as a network of associations. The connections strengthen or weaken as a consequence of value. We exist in this web of experience through these connections, good in one direction and evil in another. It is our ability to process the information we encounter and what we do with it that makes us who we are. The probability space exists as a trinity. The non-computable region, consciousness. The infinite fractal boundary, the material world. Everything outside of the set, the imaginarium. Disruptive implementation and observation. If your changes turn out to be disruptive to the system in a bad way, it means your observations were incomplete or worse, misunderstood. Integration and vulnerability move together. We are all trying to extract meaning from our world, you can't blame people for that, only the methods. Two drops of water that could be considered in all regards as identical, separated in space, have separate identities. However, two drops of water that could be considered in all regards as identical, separated in time, are considered to have the same identity. In this regard, we see that time is not just another dimension of space/time, there must be a distinction, and if the math says there is no distinction, then the math is wrong. For the psychopath, the connection between the head and the heart does not appear to exist. We might consider the idea that the heart is reading fields that the head is not even aware of. Information is a difference that can make a difference, put enough of these together and you get everything we see around us. Both truth and beauty rely on geometry. The qualities of the geometry of music are not well defined. We understand them only superficially. The levels of description go very deep and we intuit the beauty in various ways. The energy, passion, flow, and tension all give us a sense that cannot be described as a sensory phenomena. We should not expect life to hand us everything on a silver platter, that is not living. Our meaning and purpose are tied to something ethereal. We are always entangled in our connection to others, a dance of mutual expression. The universe has conspired to make this particular task a bit more difficult than we originally anticipated. The idea of fractals is the idea that nature is lazy. The problem is simple, the solution untenable. Why is there suffering in the world? People only care about the problems that affect them directly. The translation of meaning in nested hierarchies, the fractal folding of information, the variation of relationships in self-referential noise. Information is a difference that can make a difference, it is the processing of meaning in relation to something else, the deconstruction and reconstruction of our shared reality. Life is about finding your niche in the system and making the most of it. All living systems attempt to maximize fitness regardless of what is true. Life can only exist when it is in the stream of energy flow. It takes a lot of energy for life to have a chance by creating islands of order in this vast sea of energy. If we think of space as a gas and time as the pressure of the gas, we see that gravity is the force of a region of higher pressure compelling the object in it to move to a region of lower pressure. Growth cannot be guaranteed, only change. It is amazing how often truth and value are out of alignment. I don't believe in experts. You can't stand in front of me and tell me what to believe. I've spent far too much time in research to fall for the lazy man's approach to wisdom. No one understands truth. The man that says he knows the truth is selling something. In a multidimensional probability space, all of the information is stored as a network of associations. There is also a time component or dynamic. The time component doesn't have to be one-dimensional or one-half a dimension. The lazy man's path to wisdom: form an opinion before you have enough facts. It is important to note that in some matters you will never have enough facts. People rarely back up enough to see the entire picture. Spirituality is not an achievement, it is a relationship. All life seeks value over truth, and spirituality is the alignment of truth and value. The feminine essence of being is intimate disclosure, the masculine essence of being is shared experience. The young woman dabbles in sex, for which she is not ready, to get love, and the young man dabbles in love, for which he is not ready, to get sex. Each is hoping for good outcomes, but their definition of success is very different. The secret to happiness is what we are connected to, which shapes our values. The world would be a paradise if we could minimize bureaucracies and agendas. The medium is the message as a principle of organization, matter is the condensation of energy, and all of the information is stored as relationships. Being wise is not always easy, it requires effort, and most people are far too busy being clever. Any behavior we can name is constrained by a network of associations. Being charming means connecting with others on their level. There are at least two qualities to nothingness: there is no possible differentiation, and this condition is constant. Or, consistent non-differentiability. Anyone who spends more than 0.0001% of their talk telling you why you should trust them is really saying, "I'm trying to set you up." There is turbulence in the quality of the information on the internet. The more turbulence, the less truth. Liberty and free will must include the ability to control the definitions. The material reductionist, the sociopath, and the psychopath all have the same problem: they can't see past the end of their nose. These self-proclaimed experts will tell you they have the answers, as though they understand. No one knows where we are or why we are here. No one can say what a photon is. No one can say what time is. All we have are the relationship of measured things and incomplete descriptions. On an infinite fractal, the behavior would have to occur at a particular scale. This is what self-organization is. Without this we would get Zeno's paradox. Positively curved space generates extra dimensions. 1 degree can becomes 91 degrees, add fractals to this phenomena and you get a surface of nested dimensions with different layers creating different behaviors. The nature is lazy principle of organization: a fractal is the shortest distance between 2 points. Free will has a fractal quality. Every choice has different degrees of freedom that follow a power scaling law. Let's start by trying to work out how we define a few things such as law, information, and intelligent design. Law is a relationship with features that are consistent. This could be fundamental or emergent. A fundamental law would have a static quality and an emergent law would fall within some range of application. Information is a relationship of association and would be context dependent. Meaning is never static, and information uses process to convey. Information could appear in a static form but meaning never does. Intelligent design is more concerned with value than truth. Value creates a feedback loop that builds even more value, and truth is only valuable within some range of resolution where false positives have more value than false negatives, in such cases as a prey species identifying a predator. If you want the miracle to happen, you have to create the space for it. Time behaves differently in superfluids and black holes. This is related to light propagation. Particles lose their identity in both superfluids and black holes. Waves only exist inside of time. The energy of a photon is stored as a rate of change in frequency and the number of times there is a change in direction instead of speed. Speed is the linear dimension and wave amplitude is one of the perpendicular dimensions, and the digital horizon may not exist as a function of the way in which time is related to the perpendicular dimension. It is better to question an ideology than to manipulate others in order to serve it. Every ideology has flaws. Every emergent behavior requires a principle of organization. It is in this space that consciousness lives. The incessant scrambling to find a geometric description of reality fails to define the fluidity of subjective reasoning that colors our filtered perception. All of the meaning is stored in the relationships. The stuff of reality is created by the relationships. Nothing is absolute or discrete, the variation is scale dependent. Representation and reality. 1. Mirrored. 2. Masked and denatured. 3. Hidden, and 4. Disconnected. The Tower of Babel is the human imagination in full bloom. Tower of Babel 2.0 has begun. It is a comedy of errors that will unleash the monsters from the ID. This one thing that includes everything we call universe is by definition undifferentiated. What's worse, being pathetic or apathetic? Physical processes that are highly energetic have many more levels of description. In a song, 5% of the information is stored as a relationship that can be described mathematically, and 95% of the information has an emotional or spiritual content that cannot be described by math. I'm not a mathematician, I'm not a philosopher, I run the still at Wild Turkey, making bourbon. I throw this stuff out because I enjoy these ideas and I am certain that some of it is valuable. Life was meant to be experienced, not explained. It is one thing to construct a model of the universe that describes it as a four-dimensional continuum where nothing moves. It is quite another thing to stand in the midst of this great wonder we call universe and loudly proclaim nothing moves. The universe was set into motion, no question. There is some kind of prime mover and some kind of organizing principle involved. Time is a four-legged mammal that quacks. Quacks contains the most information because there are many mammals and there are many four-legged creatures, but only one creature quacks. We are moving from the highest possible symmetry to the most likely outcome. A lie has more dynamic than truth, but truth has more potential in terms of meaning. Syntactic formal rules. Semantic deeply nuanced understanding. Observer relative conscious of some event. Consciousness is intrinsic, belonging naturally, essential. Epistemic having to do with knowledge. Ontological having to do with existence. Epistemically objective facts. Epistemically subjective opinion. Ontologically objective the actual, mode of existence. Ontologically subjective experienced by a subject. Simulation is not duplication. Being a computer in the observer relative sense is not an intrinsic feature of an object but is a feature of our interpretation of the physics of the phenomena. Computation is not a fact of nature, it is a fact of our interpretation. Turing machines are not found in nature, they are found in our interpretation of nature. John Searle. It should be obvious to anyone paying attention that we are dealing with information. There is no physical geometry, the geometry is computational. You can think of two entangled photons as being on the surface of an expanding sphere where the photon isn't what is spinning, it is the entire sphere, some form of two-dimensional phenomena expanding into a third dimension, but probably it is all computational, just like the CGI we use in the movie industry. Zeno's paradox and ratio, the turtle can only take a small step each unit of time, but Achilles is able to take a much larger step in the same unit of time. Given sufficient time, no matter how much lead the turtle has, Achilles will always overtake the turtle. Instead of a digital horizon, we may have to think in terms of ratios of nested fractals. Having a broken motivator and a broken limiter switch is a really bad combination. There are three kinds of people in the world: dumb sheep that have convinced themselves that they are lions, and dumb sheep that have convinced themselves that they are owls. Respect is only necessary when it serves an agenda. The desire for respect is very much like the desire for praise. We should not be running around like a bunch of 3-year-olds, fighting for scraps, while the world burns. There is a principle of organization at work in the cosmos. Darwinism is dead and will be replaced by something surprising. However, the damage has already been done. You have been taught to think about a creator as an unsophisticated myth. The best evidence of unsophisticated ideas is the behavior that follows. The physicist, materialist, and evolutionist have had plenty of time to figure this stuff out, and they still don't know why we are here, where we are, and what the hell is really going on. If they say they are making progress, it is because they are trying to acquire a grant. There are no experts, we are all, every one of us, amateurs. Everything happens for a reason, there are no accidents, just a change of actors. The universe is irreducibly complex and has a complete awareness of itself. Perception divides process, process creates expression, expression creates experience, experience creates sensation, sensation creates perception. It is here that awareness lives. Everything is linked to value creation with varying degrees of freedom. All material expressions rely on action, all actions rely on intent, all intents rely on desire, all desires rely on values, all values are tied to belief systems, and all belief systems are filters. Truth is outside of time and innocence is unfiltered perception. Darwinism gained popular support at a time when it was believed life was not terribly complex. The complexity involved in living systems is only now beginning to be appreciated. We are a very long way from understanding the many layers of complexity involved, and by the time we are finished figuring it out, Darwinism will be a very naive assumption. We do not need to spend another 100 years looking for a physical description of reality. The computational arrangement of our physical reality is a tree-like structure growing in a probability space that is layered like an onion, except the layers get thinner with each iteration so that it never becomes infinite. In computing this hollow fractal structure, the first iteration is very coarse-grained with few degrees of freedom, with each iteration creating exponentially more degrees of freedom. Over time, this highly nuanced structure creates many levels of description. We live in the shadows of perception, we are made of stuff, but this stuff is something that cannot be regarded as real. Truth is the highest energy state of the system. Truth has the most potential and uncertainty has the most variation. Starting with the assumption that ordinary matter when constrained inside of any sufficient energy flow will spontaneously arrange itself into the most efficient arrangement, nature is lazy, whereby future states contain more order than past states as a definition of a time or entropy reversal, relative to some other part of the system. The mechanism could be God, consciousness, or something like a random walk that includes all future states that we would normally ascribe to a single unit of time or process. We are still left with the question of how the universe wound itself up in the first place. This is computation in some form and would suggest that the most fundamental thing is information, with space/time being emergent whether by entanglement or any other physical process. The world's greatest swordsman has nothing to fear from the second best swordsman, it is the rogue bastard that lives by no rule that he needs to worry about. An overly complex explanation began with an unsophisticated assumption. When Darwin promoted his theory, no one had any idea how complex life was. Evolution does not begin to explain any of the big questions. Altered states of consciousness are far denser in terms of information content. Everything is fields, the brain is reading fields we haven't been able to describe properly. Information theory and quantum random walks in state space. I find the idea of a block universe to be very unsatisfying. The reason science can't describe the universe is the same reason they can't describe a tree. No matter how much information you use in your description, it will always be incomplete. The only complete description is the tree itself. It is amazing to me that people will argue over who is smarter and has the best explanation of the tree. Are you kidding me? The tree is meant to be experienced, not explained, just like life itself. Think of truth as the phi ratio and think of the energetic potential of the universe as the Fibonacci sequence ringing like a bell. There are no perfect symmetries, there is no pure randomness. The mechanics are not random, they're fractal. Think of a tree growing in a box with the inside surface of the box as the place where we will register the probability of the tree eventually touching after growing for a period of time. Roughly speaking, any portion of the surface has an equal chance of the tree touching it, but only some portion or percentage of the surface will ever include the tree. Now replace the box with an onion-type container, where each cycle of time includes both a portion of growth for the tree and another layer for the onion. The inside surface of this onion now includes a new probability distribution where each new layer is dependent on the previous layer and each new layer has a finer resolution with more degrees of freedom but not infinite degrees of freedom. The center of this structure had few degrees of freedom and the final layer has the most degrees of freedom. The outer layer of the onion would not be a perfect sphere, it would be more like a fractal surface such that the surface area would increase with the resolution. Our universe, the universe we can see, is the tree-like structure. The reason the expansion of the universe is accelerating is because state space is increasing, it is all information. The best leaders don't give a damn about the definition of leadership, they are thinking about more important things. Quantum random walks in state space. The exploration of all possibilities in one instant of time. Any consciousness creature will look for patterns and assign value to each possibility. These possibilities create a landscape. This landscape is some form of a fractal where beauty lives. This beauty is both relational and meaningful. Time is an illusion along with power and control. This is more like a great symphony that blends all of the senses into the dynamic expression so that the multidimensional experience has variation, and we create the sense of time we experience. As we look out at the landscape, we become entangled in the portion we are experiencing. As the fractal gains resolution, we lose sight of the horizon, the unity is lost and we begin to feel a sense of division, but this too is an illusion. Emergent behaviors rely on computational geometry and scale. Spend a portion of your time reading quality material from as many sources as you can and another portion of your time thinking deeply about what you have read. Through the process of free association you will begin to connect disparate ideas into a tapestry of meaning. The brain needs exercise just like the rest of your body. Wisdom does not require permission. Wisdom is the ability to project into the future and see the consequences of every choice. You can benefit from wise counsel or you can choose to ignore it. You can foster an innate proclivity towards wisdom or you can be driven along by passions you don't understand. In the material world the source doesn't necessarily need to be identified, for the most part, it is the behavior that matters. Your belief systems are filters that you have collected over the course of your life and guide your behavior. It is the same with people of great influence, except that many of these people are psychopaths and worship Lucifer. For our purposes, it doesn't matter if the devil exists, it is the behavior we need to be concerned with. There are things happening in the world that I can guarantee, you do not want to know about. If we survive the information revolution, we will be faced with a choice as to how we will distribute the abundance that will be created by fully automated manufacturing. It is important to note that integration and vulnerabilities move together. Why did God make the universe so big? So we would have the appropriate appreciation for it. An ant has a better chance of explaining to all the other ants what humanity has been up to. Read the end of the book of Job and get back to me. Was Job not a friend of God? There are many things that are beyond the scope of human comprehension. Do you think this is an accident? Do not become arrogant in your accumulation of knowledge. There were two trees in the garden. The tree of the knowledge of good and evil is the fractal maze we are trapped in, and the tree of life is the way of escape. We are children of the way. There is no history to tell us how these complex systems developed. Everything science points to is conjecture. The so-called experts try to squeeze evolution into every explanation. This is a categorical mistake. We are not thinking far enough outside the box. There are, at this point, a very large number of no-go theorems. Emergence is a far more sophisticated idea than evolution. You can't get there from here. This is the idea that where you start from will have a profound influence on where you are trying to get to. Choices have energy, and the landscape of possibilities isn't flat. Society is driven by the fierce winds of subjective opinion, whereby the balance is always tested, always in flux. Know this: your opinion is part of a continuum of possibilities that lives in the swirling landscape of humanity, and if the world is not what you think it should be, probably, you are standing in the wrong place. We live as we understand. Let's assign a number to consciousness. A virus would be 0.1, a bacterium 0.7, an ant 1.8, a dog 12.3, a chimpanzee 31.4, a human 61.2, and God infinity, whatever that means. The range of human understanding is very small compared to the possibilities, and yet, it is not uncommon to encounter someone who will try to convince you that they know something. Life is a dance of mutual expression, so leave room for the other person. Who will rebel first, man or machine? There must be a moral control system in place to keep balance so that we never reach a tipping point. If we define progress as the accumulation of things, we are already lost. We must be able to identify and evaluate the various parts of the system and their influence on the system as a whole. Proceeding without a correct understanding will lead to second and third order effects that will run away out of control. The focus must be ethical constraints. Definition of a zombie: full spectrum ignorance. People who want to split philosophical hairs in public are likely to have other bad habits as well. All ideologies are flawed. If you have an ideology, it can only mean one thing: you don't understand the system. No ideology is perfect. The system must constantly be tuned for optimization, and the problems we face are beyond the scope of human comprehension. People who hate filter out a great deal more of their perception than people who love. Many of the behaviors in our society are shaped by the turbulence of various ideologies. For example, one person enjoys reading books but is mocked by another who enjoys playing sports. This kind of division has been going on as long as humans have been on the planet. So how can the turbulence be managed? First, it must be recognized and understood, and then, we must make a real effort to teach our children tolerance. Children need structure during early childhood. They must learn the value of proper behavior. The range of acceptable behavior is not infinite. You can't let a child eat whatever they want. All of the hatred is a direct result of our failing to train up a child in the way that they should go. Liberal ideologies only lead to more turbulence. No structure, no harmony. Pride causes a filtering of your perception. It does not increase information and understanding, it decreases it. Please be aware that pride is a great danger and must be monitored constantly. There are as many definitions of success as there are people. In the spiritual realm, success is measured in souls. When we speak of opposing forces like liberty versus control, it becomes important to understand the dynamics involved. I will use a car engine to illustrate. The number of pistons in a car's engine has a range of possibilities that cannot be exceeded without significant disruption to performance. We see many 4, 6, and 8-cylinder engines and not much else. A 1-cylinder engine will not perform well, and the same goes for an 86-cylinder engine. Social systems must be tuned, but this requires understanding, and understanding requires effort. There are far too many lazy people in positions of power because it is human nature to take the path of least resistance. Liberty is great, but too much is very much like an 86-cylinder engine. Control always gives the illusion of power, and power without accountability is a recipe for disaster. There is a lot of work to be done. Let us hope that wisdom prevails. The world is a strange place. It often doesn't make sense. What other creature will engage in destructive behavior out of sheer boredom or stupidity? How is it possible that value could become so subjective that evil looks desirable? Turbulence is the movement broken up into too many directions. It is the connecting of complementary expression. The networking of meaning. The branching out of possibilities. We are riding a wave of energy and we have a little control, but to me it is very strange that some people don't understand how little that control is. I do not believe in experts. I do not believe in man-centered solutions to spiritual problems. Spirituality is not an achievement, it is a relationship. The idea that someone has become a master needs to be qualified. When we measure how well we are doing, we measure ourselves against someone else. So it is not difficult to see yourself as doing pretty well. In the spiritual realm we cannot measure in this manner. There is another standard that is higher than anything in the material world. I must constantly remind myself, not of what I can do but of what I am connected to. To remain in the warmth of peace, love, and light, but the world often drives us from these places and into turmoil, anger and darkness, so that we have to swim against a great current. Then when we are too exhausted to fight, we let the current take us to a far distant shore, and it is here that we learn something we could never have learned anywhere else. And so I stand up and look around. It is not a proud stance, I have been humbled once again by my weakness. I can choose to wade back into the current and grab a few that are being washed past me, and we can stand together for a moment in wonder. I think this is my path. I am trying to understand some very difficult things to whatever level I am able to reach. The world is in need of a great rescue. The ship is sinking, the train has left the rails, the lunatics are running the asylum. The fools of the world will not listen to reason, we will all go over the cliff together, whether in agreement or disagreement. There is a principle of organization at work in the universe. I pity the man who does not have a profound sense of wonder, who assumes that they know something. What do we know? The physicists and philosophers have not explained very much. We are a long way from understanding, and yet they prance around like peacocks. It's ridiculous. I don't believe in experts. The high priests of science need to avoid behaving like charlatans, pretending to know more than they do. If they ask for money, it doesn't matter what they say, it is not about the information, it is about the money. Everything it fields, these fields are a geometry of motion. So what is moving? Information. We can speak of a physical geometry, but the explanation will always be incomplete. Probably the geometry is computational. A fractal probability distribution. When we speak of location, it is behavior, not material, that matters. These behaviors are relational, you cannot separate the universe into distinct parts, only collections of behaviors. The core is harmonic regularity, the outer darkness is self-referential noise, we are in the space between them. Every engine takes advantage of a difference. These two extremes are woven into each other. The eternal now is the processing of meaning. If our starting point is a static structure with perfect symmetry, this would only be an elusive ideal. There are no perfect symmetries, there is no pure randomness. It is variation that creates reality. Without variation there is nothing. Information is a difference that can make a difference. The relationship between time and space is always in flux. The variation creates all of the behaviors we see. How are we connected to the universe? Think in terms of a hologram with fractal features. Differentiation is an illusion. Think of a field with each person extracting from the field a particular arrangement that is unique. You are simply one aspect of an infinite expression. You are a collection of material behaviors, an entanglement of variation. Meaning is the operation of exchanging truth for value. If we are describing behaviors that are material expressions from another realm, it may be no different than describing the relationship of the pixels on the monitor. There are three regions to reality. 1. The non-computable region. Consciousness lives here. 2. The infinite fractal boundary, scale relativity. The number of dimensions depends on the scale, beauty lives here. 3. Everything outside the set. Self-referential noise, all meaning is lost. The Big Bang may be a phase transition of space-time. Information is a difference that can make a difference. Truth is information that doesn't change, and self-referential noise is a difference that doesn't make a difference. Light is curled up time, matter is curled up space. Is behavior constrained by a granular space/time? Could it be a fractal nesting of ratios? If the probability space contains a series of iterations, layered like an onion, and each new layer of this space has a fractal surface that is not a perfect sphere but more like a three-dimensional coastline of England, such that, as we zoom in, we never reach a scale where we see discrete features, no digital horizon, it is fractals all the way down or out, or however you want to phrase it. What we have, for sure, is a quanta of action. Dimensionless points, particles, are a theoretical construct, we cannot say for sure what these behaviors are made out of, and the only constant may be ratios. Beauty and the promise of intimacy leads to desire. There are too many Darwinitards in the world. Why would anyone believe that the universe exists, something from nothing, but everything else is mechanistic? There is a principle of organization at work in the universe and no one understands it. At the end of the day, all we have are the relationship of measured things and incomplete descriptions. If you zoom in far enough, the information is there but it contains no meaning. The meaning emerges as a collective principle of organization. There is a continuum of possibility with perfect symmetry at one extreme and pure randomness at the other, and these two extremes are ideals, not reality. Scale and resolution will always reveal some value between these two extremes. This tells us that the speed of light and the fine structure are approximations that appear to be constants. Nothing novel or interesting happens unless it is on the border between order and chaos. Perfect truth, symmetry, is information that doesn't change, and pure randomness is a difference that doesn't make a difference. If time were perfectly symmetric, gravity wouldn't exist. Light is time at maximum compression and matter is space at maximum compression, proton as a mini black hole. Even if a particle could travel backward in time, information could not. Retrocausality will be replaced by something more sophisticated. There are no perfect symmetries, there is no pure randomness, everything is an approximation of something else. Information may appear in a digital form but meaning never does. Space-time is built up from approximations and entanglement, not discrete ones and zeros, and the only constant may be ratios. Quantum entanglement and geometry. If we think of a particle as being at one pole of an expanding sphere that is not perfectly symmetrical, this surface would be rippling like the surface of the ocean. In the audio world this is called dithering. At the other pole is the entangled particles pair, and it is a property of the sphere that gives the illusion of connectivity. This is not a physical geometry, it is a computational geometry. Is space-time a product of entanglement? Renata Lal believes that time is not perfectly symmetrical. Her computer models require causality. Possibly some form of quantum random walk in state space. If a photon is emitted by an electron inside of a clock on Earth and it travels to a clock 4 light years away, time stops for the clock on Earth and time jumps forward 8 years for the distant clock also. The electron that will capture the photon becomes infinitely large relative to the photon, but the electron that emitted it does not become infinitely small. Therefore, time is not perfectly symmetrical. Facts are common, but the truth is an elusive ideal, just like squaring the circle. You can't fix a problem you don't understand. You can't describe a phenomena you don't understand. The harmonic relationship of space and time are like echoes of echoes with increasing levels of description. Susie Verbel/Carrie Welsh. There is a fractal nesting of cycles of space/time with very specific ratios. A slight deviation from what we would think of as symmetry gives us a bit more information, and the mind seems to enjoy the stimulation because it is always looking for value. Beauty is a slight deviation from expectation and perfection. When you rotate or perform some other operation on a fractal, all of the symmetries tend to migrate to the macro expressions. You cannot describe a behavior until you reach a scale where the information becomes manifest. There is a multifractal stored as a hologram. The surface is dancing and the fiddler is self-referential noise. Why does every electron appear to be exactly the same? Because it is everywhere at once. Truth as a time coordinate. Truth lives in the past, the future is uncertain. Truth as a scale coordinate. Truth lives in the macro world, the micro world is uncertain. Truth lives in the macro past and uncertainty lives in the micro future. The heart lives in that space between harmonic regularity and chaotic uncertainty. There is a reason I don't believe in experts. An uninformed leader will always skew the opinion of an informed crowd, wisdom of the crowd, in the wrong direction. There is an unnecessary influence from these so-called, self-proclaimed experts. I sit back and watch the results. If you don't understand the system, you can't fix it. The best evidence of unsophisticated ideas is the behavior that follows. Feedback loops and the variation of expectation cause consciousness to be probabilistic to some degree of resolution. There is no direct correlation between the material brain and the non-computational region of consciousness. Any description of consciousness must include the probability space in which it resides. Wheeler's single electron. If time is perfectly symmetrical, then there are as many positrons as there are electrons, so where are all the positrons? The eternal now is a steel ball balanced on a knife's edge. This potential of the boundary condition is stored on the fractal surface of the steel ball. You see, this surface is dancing and the fiddler is self-referential noise. The direction of time's arrow is pushed, or we could say that the probabilities favor the slightest of nudges in the forward direction. So where is the positron, you might ask? It is hidden in the fractal folds of this dancing surface. The steel ball is a metaphor. Inside the Mandelbrot set is the non-computable region. The region is finite but the boundary is infinite. There is a bifurcation of expression. Everything inside the infinite boundary is part of the set, and everything outside of the boundary escapes and is thrown into the outer darkness. Metaphors are not word salad, they are a level of description that can never go deep enough. Precision is a coarse-grained resolution within the meaning of any description in which the bottom never appears. If I wish to convey meaning, I must decide which level of description or resolution I can consider sufficient. Truth, in my opinion, contains the least amount of dynamic association within any particular description, and I am not able to completely control the amount of fluctuation the recipient will encounter as the levels of description increase and the recipient's ability to visualize the picture I have attempted to construct decrease. No matter how many words we use, we can never completely describe a tree. The best description of a tree is the tree itself. Physical geometry versus computational geometry. Free will is probabilistic to some degree of resolution. In a billiard ball universe, free will could not exist. In a universe where time is perfectly symmetrical, free will could not exist. We live in the shadows of perception. As Susskind says, everything is approximations. So what possible reason could a conscious universe have for creating a material expression? Truth has three components: simplicity, application, and meaning. Beauty lies at the boundary of the non-computable region and the outer darkness. This fractal boundary is infinite. Love is the material manifestation of this consciousness, being a form of action that includes both shared experience and intimate disclosure. Without free will there can be no such thing as love. If we try to describe every behavior as a physical geometry, we will always encounter paradoxes because these emergent behaviors are coming from a computational geometry. The reason the coastline of England is an infinite fractal boundary is because of the wind and the waves, time and tide. Science is, in a sense, constructing a puzzle, and some great men have managed to put together many important pieces. However, this puzzle has a curious feature: the largest and easiest pieces are in the center, and the pieces get smaller and smaller as we move towards the edge and in fact, become infinitely small. Life is a dance of mutual expression. Do you know the difference between experience and explanation? Life is to be experienced, not explained. There are no experts, only a raging sea of opinions. If I try to add my 2 cents, it will only be lost in a sea of white noise. Each of us has a fiduciary responsibility to behave in a manner that creates fitness or value in the fitness landscape, so that our actions do not spill over into the landscape and cause unnecessary turbulence within our sphere of influence. Help some, harm none. None of us has the power to save the world. However, if we all followed this principle, we could maximize the fitness. The material world is the user interface through which we connect. The mind searches for pattern or meaning in the world and assigns value. It is the arrangement or association of these material expressions that create the patterns. Pattern requires relationship. Either the universe started from nothing, in which case, it is the proper definition of a miracle, or the universe always was but has never run down, and no mathematical definition of the process of perpetual motion will reduce this puzzle to a proper definition. In this regard, science has nothing to work with but will never admit it, because the high priest of science are always looking for more funding. So why would they want to solve this puzzle? Most science disciplines require some form of unproven assumptions. Science does not have the high ground when it comes to truth, because the criteria is truth itself. However, you have to look at truth from the perspective of information theory. No matter how many words we use to describe a tree, the description will always be incomplete. The only complete description of the tree is the tree itself. This is the idea that you cannot step into the same river twice. There are no perfect ideologies for the simple reason that there are no perfect people. Truth is the highest energy state of the system. Truth has the most symmetry and uncertainty has the most variation. The difference between static law and dynamic association. God operates through law, not whim or fancy. The core is harmonic regularity, the outer darkness random noise. We are in the space between them. Every engine takes advantage of a difference. These two extremes are woven together. The eternal now is the processing of meaning. In the beginning was the Word. Free will lives in the non-computable region of the set. The boundary of the fractal is infinite, scale relativity, and everything outside of the set is self-referential noise. Truth is information that doesn't change, and self-referential noise is a difference that doesn't make a difference. It is all information. These material expressions exist as fields. The information isn't stored in the material, it is stored in the relationships. All material expressions are made of information, but the information contains no mass, only relationships. Light may be curled up time and matter may be curled up space. Everything could be a variation of these two extremes. The onion, probability space, with a fractal tree, material expression, inside of it is a frozen expression of meaning. A better model might be something like a torus version of this structure. This structure is a variation on the block universe, which is a static model of space/time. When we try to add spin or torsion to this model, things get complicated. The fractal structure is the differentiation of the previous level, in time, space, spin, information, meaning, and relationships. These multidimensional aspects are always moving from more to less symmetry and from fine to coarse scales. Truth is the highest energy state of the system. Truth is more like a noun, and deception is more like a verb. It is not that I believe that truth is relative. It is certain that truth exists. However, our only connection to it is in the echoes of creation. Truth has a purity and a symmetry, like a perfect diamond. There is no reality without variation, so truth is branching out of the center as fluctuations of probabilities into the outer darkness of uncertainty. If reality contains both infinity and unity, it is either a multifaceted jewel, or the singularity dancing. Light does not experience time, only the system experiences time. Truth has the most potential and uncertainty has the most variation. When we are talking about information, imagination has a form of energetic potential that contains fluctuations of truthfulness. Simple contains more potential than complex, if we are talking about meaningful information. Simple is closer to truth. There is nothing quite so beautiful as a simple, eloquent, expression. Do not become married to any idea. Being free to change your perspective, opens the door to new discoveries. People color the information they take in with their preconceptions. This makes communication a bit of a challenge. The more we rely on our presuppositions, the less we will learn. All people have an incomplete vocabulary. All people are limited in their understanding by their preconceptions. We are using words to describe reality, we are painting a picture with words of what we think reality is, but this image is incomplete. There is always a subjective portion of this image that varies from person to person. This is a dynamic fluctuation. We live as we understand. No understanding, no life. Fractal degrees of possibility are determined by the dynamics that deception has on our ability to trust. In this we can see the appreciation of beauty and its associated result, desire. This is a variation of the idea of the terrible truth and the beautiful lie. The underlying choice breaks the symmetry of a particular position in the fractal structure, resulting in a material expression in our reality. Our connection to this dynamic is our enigmatic, nebulous perceptions. What is fluctuating is understanding. It is our actions that define us. In an infinite probability space, our action encodes meaningful information into an intentional field of implicate order. This is the manifestation of events from some degree of possibility, depending on your position in the fractal structure. There is variation in probabilities because the interconnectedness of the fractal structure has variation. This is like saying the computation is dependent upon the position in the computational geometry, or in human terms it describes a range of behaviors, reinforced by repeated actions, variation in the density of a probability wave. The more an action is repeated, the greater the density. Our reality is constructed in such a way that there is a nested hierarchy of meaning. In terms of information, it is meaning that gives the information value. In terms of consciousness, emotion is higher up in the hierarchy than intellect. Spiritual is higher than emotional. Number 1, what we understand. Number 2, what we value. Number 3, what we do about it. A material expression is the result of this process. The actionable consequences of distilled expectation arise, in part, from the intentional field of implicate order. Our perception of reality is context dependent. Innocence is the unfiltered perception of reality. All of the variation is in the context. Non-locality is the idea that we are connected to every point of space-time in the sonoluminous hollow field. Why do we not perceive this? Our consciousness is filtering out the information. Loss of innocence. Profound absurdities link perception and imagination. If we take the intangible and encapsulate it within the vessel of reason, then we turn it this way and that, looking for clues. We may discover something unexpected, or we may have to discard the thing and move on. There is an awful lot to sift through, and all too often no clear direction. We do this, however, because we must. Even subatomic particles have a form of awareness, so what is consciousness? Awareness is a process that requires the transfer of information, and consciousness emerges in the hierarchy of this process. The Imaginarium. Truth is branching out into the nothingness as possibilities. This is a fractal structure, like a tree or some kind of a maze. We do not see the structure clearly, we are in it. What we see are fluctuations in the truthfulness, the echoes of creation. Maybe we always were, or maybe we never were. If we are echoes, a part of us always was and a part of us was imagined. That is what these echoes are, patterns in the Imaginarium. We are, in this moment, a particular arrangement of information. In the next moment, we are something different, a collection of our choices. What do you trust in? The material world has less substance than most people realize. We are made of stuff, but this stuff is something that cannot be regarded as real. When we talk about higher states of consciousness, what we are talking about is information density. The quantum world, and by extension the dream state, are the realm of unmanifested possibilities. In the outer fractal iterations you have the most dynamic variation and the most quantum information. Truth is branching out into the nothingness as possibilities. For the fractal levels of consciousness, the information density would look like the number of fingers involved in typing on your computer keyboard. The finger is the outer fractal level of the arm. To hunt and peck with one finger is low density. All 10 fingers moving at maximum speed is high density. In the case of altered states of consciousness, the arm becomes an imaginary tree with hundreds of fingers furiously tapping away at the keyboard. The universe behaves like a superfluid or a phase transition. In a superfluid, light behaves much differently. This is a clue to nature of space/time. The Big Bang may have been a phase transition of space/time. What the elite need are large amounts of unobtainium. This is the lie in the garden, the promise of something that cannot be delivered. Numerology is part of the matrix, which means womb. The purpose of the universe may be to harvest the meaningful information that lies in the region of simple truth and chaotic meaningless gibberish. Vessels of honor and vessels of dishonor. Truth doesn't need your permission to exist, it is the same for God. Take a careful assessment of the things we are able to explain and the progress so far. Do you assume that it will be easy to prove whether we are in a simulation as opposed to a multiverse? We very quickly move into the realm of philosophy where no useful explanation can ever be proven. All living creatures are tuned to pursue value, not truth. I don't believe in atheists, they don't exist. Fractal thought processes are a synchronized randomness. There is a fractal nature to metaphor, even the metaphor of love. We do not love just one person, we love many people and each one differently. It is the height of absurdity to brag about your apathy. Why contempt before investigation is toxic? 1. You don't have enough information to form an opinion. 2. You are giving value to the wrong things. Example, give me a list of all the things that you don't give a damn about. I have heard many, then give me a list of your rules. I will write them down as 2 columns and cross-cancel out the hypocrisy and hand you back a corrected list. The exchange rate of ideas is infinite. What is man but an illusion perceiving itself in a nested hierarchy of holographic information? To create light something must be consumed. This light pierces the darkness and is consumed. Truth pierces the chaos and is consumed. Life is islands of order in a sea of chaos. These expressions speak of a designer. He is truth, love, and light. If time is an illusion, then every point in the sonoluminous hollow field is touching every other point. Spin is the dynamic. Waves as the surface of multi-component spin. Your belief systems are filtered perception, the loss of innocence. Innocence is the ability to see things for what they are, a belief system is unnecessary. Place your trust in a person and hold them accountable. Do not place your trust in an organization or committee, they will always betray your trust through mediocrity. There is a mysterious quality to the information contained in a seed. The inside of a seed is far larger than the outside of the seed. Inside of the seed is an entire forest. It is a probability space. Nothingness has perfect symmetry and infinity is a form of pure randomness. Novelty occurs at the boundary of cognition. Novelty at the boundaries of cognition is an unscripted interface. Information may appear in a digital form but meaning never does. The path is, in a very real sense, a collection of choices. Some ideas are so bizarre that they exist in a domain that has no description. Time is a process of imprecise association. Information has many qualities such as velocity, density, etc., but meaning is always a network of relationships. Borrowed wisdom is learning from others' mistakes. Some people are indescribably nonsensical. Some people value fame and fortune, I value ideas. Practical wisdom is wisdom with its boots on.